Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to Honeywell and CNBC-TV18 presents India Energy Transition Summit. I'm Swati Shahi. Well, we have gathered here today in Delhi for this exclusive summit, bringing together industry leaders, policymakers, and visionaries from various sectors to discuss and drive forward our collective efforts towards a sustainable and energy-efficient future. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not just a meeting of minds, but a crucial step in redefining how we approach energy, technology, and sustainability in India. As we stand on the brink of a transformative era, the shift towards sustainable energy and its resources is not only essential for mitigating the effects of climate change, but also crucial for ensuring long-term energy security and economic growth. With an ambitious goal to achieve 500 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity by 2030, India is at the forefront of global efforts to reduce carbon emissions and enhance energy efficiency. Through the course of this evening's proceedings, the sessions will center around how industries and organizations can play a pivotal role in this transformation. We will explore how innovative technology, sustainable practices, and strategic investments can drive towards achieving our ambitious targets. The energy transition is not just a challenge, but an opportunity for growth, innovation, and leadership. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, to set the stage for these important discussions, it is my great pleasure to invite on stage Mr. Ashish, President of Honeywell, to deliver the opening address. May we please have him on stage with a round of applause.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of Honeywell and CNBC to the India Energy Transition Summit. I would like to take a moment to express my gratitude to our Chief Sustainability Officer, Dr. Gavin Towler, for traveling all the way from US to be here with us for this summit, the industry leaders, you all, and our esteemed panelists for joining us this evening as we delve into one of the key topics that is being discussed and debated around the world, and that is how do we accelerate clean energy transition across countries, including India. In a short while, we'll be joined by our chief guests, Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, Honorable Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas, and Shri Prahlad Joshi, Honorable Minister of New and Renewable Energy, Government of India. We feel privileged to have them speak and share their vision on how India can achieve its sustainability goals. While we await their arrival, let me share my thoughts and how we have structured the evening today. So in my mind, here's the problem statement. India has about 2.8 gigatons of CO2 problem. Out of this, about 60 to 65% comes from hard-to-abate sectors. And by hard-to-abate sectors, I mean power, steel, refining, petroleum, natural gas, all of the hard-to-abate sectors. And in my mind, you cannot really achieve the net zero goal that the Prime Minister has set for us to achieve by 2070 unless we have solved the problem of hard-to-abate sectors. And therefore, today we have set up this session to tackle this problem. And in my mind, you cannot really solve this problem alone. And this is one of the problems that is plaguing our generation. You cannot really solve this alone. So the academia, the industry, the technology providers like us, the government, the policymakers have to come together to find a solution. And therefore, this evening, we have been very careful in choosing the panels we have set up. The first panel that we have is on green hydrogen. Now, there's great progress being made on green hydrogen. We hear about it all day. But there are key problems that still need to be solved. For example, how do we solve the demand equation? How do we solve the cost equation? The infrastructure has to be built around the green hydrogen to really make it a mainstream fuel. And therefore, the first panel will tackle these tough questions today. That's our first panel. The second panel is around battery storage. We know India has done really well with solar capacity addition, but it's also true that to realize the full potential of solar energy, it is important to put battery technology and battery systems to realize the full potential of solar, but there are significant problem statements around battery, the cost, the infrastructure, the safety, the raw material to support the large capacity of battery that needs to be put in. The second panel will tackle these tough questions. And finally, the third one is my favorite, which is biomass. And it's rightly, the panel, the session is named Waste to Watts. I just love the name. And India is endowed with so much of biomass as feedstock. The question is, how do we leverage this immense feedstock capacity we have to really turn it into green fuel? And if we are able to do that, we are going to leapfrog so many economies. And these are our three panels, and I think that these are interesting panels. Of course, from a Honeywell perspective, we have a lot of technology in each of these areas that, of course, our my colleagues will be talking about as we go through these panels. And I hope that today's sessions will give you some food for thought, because as you go back, and you are the industry leaders and the champions, as you go back, hopefully the discussions today will help in solving the problem and take this discussion forward and the solution forward. So with that, I'll stop. Welcome once again, and thank you all for making it today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Modi. Thank you so much once again for that inspiring start. Your insights have set a wonderful tone for today's proceedings. Ladies and gentlemen, our next session is the technology address by Dr. Gavin P. Towler, Chief Sustainability Officer at Honeywell. Dr. Towler is at the forefront of innovation in sustainable technology, and today he will share his thoughts on how technology is shaping the future of sustainable growth. Please welcome him with a round of applause. Dr. Gavin P. Towler.
So thank you all very much for joining us here this evening. And thank you, Ashish, for the great introduction to today's event. I'm delighted to be with you today to share Honeywell's sustainability journey and tell you a little about some of the technologies that we work on. I have been with Honeywell for 26 years, and for 25 of 26 years, I was working in the business that developed the renewable fuels and alternative fuel technologies. And in the last year, I've had to learn all about the other technologies across the rest of Honeywell, and I'd like to share a little of that with you this evening. So, when we talk about sustainability, the United Nations definition of sustainability was meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And this is what sustainability is all about. It's about designing a world for our children, for our grandchildren, so that we solve the problems rather than pass them on unsolved. And Honeywell's sustainability offerings, when we talk about sustainability, we mean technologies that lead to improved safety, reduced environmental impact, and increased societal resilience. And that's technologies that we sell to our business customers to deliver those outcomes of safety, environmental impact, and societal resilience for the communities that they serve, for their customers. Everyone, you hear the word sustainability a lot, and everyone is talking about this. 55% of major corporations have set a target for reducing their own CO2 emissions to zero. And 90% of executives report that they're increasing their investment in sustainable technologies and in sustainability initiatives. But nobody has all of the technologies needed to do this. Nobody is able to solve the entire problem. And this is where a company like Honeywell that has a long, long history in automation, in energy and fuels processing, and in the aerospace and aviation sector, this is where we can help, and help our customers to address our own carbon footprint, largely using our own technology. and we've remediated land, we've reduced our water consumption. 60% of Honeywell's R&D spend actually goes towards these outcomes of sustainability, of environmental impact, safety, and societal resilience. But we aren't done. We have set goals for the future, and we've just completed our fourth round of greenhouse gas reduction goals. We just met our targets that we had set for 2023. Our next target is a 50% reduction in our US energy use by 2030. And by 2030, we'll reduce our US energy use 50%. I'm pleased to announce today we've actually reduced our India carbon footprint already by 52%. India beat the United States to that carbon reduction. And beyond that, we are planning to be carbon neutral across all of our operations. So all of our Scope 1 and Scope 2 by 2035. And we've signed up to science-based targets to address our Scope 3 as well by 2037. So targets are good. All companies, you heard 55% of companies have a target. But you have to go beyond setting targets. Pledges mean nothing if you don't achieve them. The targets have to be translated into actual plans and then implemented as technology. So we have a plan across all of Honeywell's facilities to address the remaining part of our emissions. For our largest chemicals producing sites, we're doing this through carbon capture, through electrification projects to move away from fired heat to electrification, and through reducing our F-gas footprint, and then within our electricity consumption using microgrids and on-site solar generation. And we are deploying technology that was actually developed here in India for the microgrid management and for battery energy systems, battery energy storage systems, to manage our own electrification. And for the rest of our sites, we are looking at fleet efficiency, again at renewable power sourcing, and integrating renewable power into all of our operations. We've mapped out all of the projects we have to carry out to achieve our 2030 goals and our 2035 goals. And much of this is deploying the technologies like green hydrogen, carbon capture, renewable biogas, which we're going to be talking about today. But our leadership in addressing environmental impact goes well beyond the technology that we use in our own facilities. When you look across all of Honeywell, Honeywell is a $36 billion company. 60% of that is these sustainable outcomes technologies. So that's $21 billion of revenue comes from safety, environmental impact, and societal resilience. Across a whole range of different things, from measuring and reporting, energy efficiency, electrification, specific solutions for net zero, circularity, and safety and societal resilience. I won't read everything that it says on this chart, but I'm going to talk about some of the key technologies and some of the key ways in which we are developing the technical tools that society needs for a sustainable future. So I want to begin with sustainable aviation. You often hear people say, well, is flying sustainable? Should we fly less? We are a company that has done a lot of innovation in the aviation space. And we've all seen in our personal lives what a tremendous benefit aviation is to humanity. By flying, we can reduce the time to go places. It allows not only for business travel, not only for vacations, it allows people to fly to different countries. I flew to the United States as a graduate student, as did many of my co-workers, and I liked it there, and I decided to stay there. But my family, I'm originally from England, my family are in England. I could emigrate to the United States and still visit my family. My wife is also an immigrant. Her family also live outside the United States. And many, many of us have family in different countries, but we can go visit them. It's not like 100 years ago where you wave goodbye and you maybe never saw that relative ever again. And you can go somewhere, get an education, and come back. And all of these things are enabled by flight. But we need flight to be sustainable. It is not a big part of the global carbon footprint. Only about 3% of the global carbon footprint comes from flight, but it's a very visible part. So we are working on several technologies to make aviation more sustainable. Beginning with sustainable aviation fuel, and you will hear much more about this later in the later session. You can make aviation fuel from biomass. The problem of aviation is how do you lift an enormous metal pressure container, a big airplane, 40,000 feet in the air, with 200 to 400 people inside it. Okay? That requires a lot of lift, a lot of thrust. And to make airplanes fly, you need a very concentrated form of energy. All the energy we have on this planet comes from sunshine. You can take sunshine, you can grow plants, you can feed them to dinosaurs, you can bury them under rocks, leave them for 2 million years, pull out crude oil, and you can convert that crude oil and you can turn 10, maybe 15% of it into jet fuel. That's one way to make jet fuel. That is the only way we had of making jet fuel 20 years ago. But some of the work we've done at Honeywell UOP in the last 20 years, we've developed all kinds of other ways to turn solar power into concentrated hydrocarbon energy. You can grow crops, you could grow ethanol, you can grow corn, you can grow sugarcane or corn and convert those to ethanol. And you can go from ethanol to jet fuel by dehydration and then oligomerization. You can take food waste, used cooking oil, or waste fats from animal rendering, and you can convert those into jet fuel. You can even take solar power, electrolyze water to hydrogen, react it with captured CO2 and turn that into jet fuel. All of these are solar power concentrated into a dense energy form so that you can then use that to fly an aircraft. So you're going to hear more about sustainable aviation fuel later, and it's been our work of the last 2 decades to develop different routes that will work in different regions. And for India, as a major, India has the world's largest population. That means also India has the world's largest agricultural sector. As a country with a large agricultural sector, India has many excellent options for making sustainable biofuels. But that's only one way of flying. We're also looking at different propulsion technologies. You can take that same hydrogen, and for shorter flights, people are developing aircraft that will be fueled by hydrogen, either using internal combustion engines or fuel cell engines. And we're working on those propulsion technologies and integrating them and looking at hybrid aircraft that will fly shorter routes, like many of the intercity routes that India is now expanding. And the Indian aviation sector is one of the fastest growing in the world in terms of number of aircraft ordered, number of airports built, number of gates being added every year. So India will have the opportunity to take advantage of hydrogen flight. And then for shorter trips, for deliveries, and for even urban air taxis, there's electric propulsion. And we're working on electric aircraft and electric propulsion systems that will enable air transport within cities, for deliveries, for ultra-fast transportation, and actually it has a lower carbon footprint than taking a taxi through traffic, even if the taxi is an electric vehicle. And for emergency responses, for first responders, if you have a flood and people are stranded on a roof and you need to get a boat to them, or you need to get a life raft to somebody who's been swept away by the water, a delivery drone is much, much safer than having a person go into the water to make that delivery. So we believe that aviation is a tremendous benefit to humanity, and we believe that with the right propulsion technologies and with the right fuels, it can be made sustainable. And the last thing here is flight efficiency. And this is, again, a technology that was developed here in Bangalore and in Madurai. Better software has been demonstrated to give as much as a 16% improvement in the efficiency of flying. And that's actually data from test flights that have been flown using our flight management software. The main focus of today is on industrial solutions. And there are many ways that industry, particularly the difficult-to-abate sectors of industry, can begin deploying now the technologies that they will need to have for a carbon-neutral future. We are deploying these technologies into our own manufacturing plants. So we talked about renewable fuels. Renewable fuels is not just sustainable aviation fuel. You can also make renewable diesel, which allows people to extend the life of their diesel generators without having the carbon footprint. And we have a range of technologies for biogas and for upgrading biogas and making it cleaner burning, but also capturing the CO2 so that it can be used nearer the agricultural sources that it came from to enhance agricultural productivity rather than going into the air and causing global warming. Energy storage and distribution is a key technology to increasing the amount of renewable energy in the electricity supply. India has a lot of renewable energy potential. In fact, several states in India already are net zero for their electricity production because of the hydroelectricity resources they have. So Himachal Pradesh and Sikkim, Jammu and Kashmir already have zero carbon electricity. So hydroelectricity is very good because it's dispatchable. But India also has enormous potential for solar power. However, solar power is only available when the sun is shining, and everywhere in the world, that's only 12 hours a day. So when you have solar power as a very high proportion of the grid mix, you need to have energy storage to provide the electricity overnight. And our team in our largest research laboratory for Honeywell is here in Bengaluru. And that team developed a battery energy storage system and control system, which we're now selling all around the world. And battery energy storage not only enables higher use of renewable power, but it also increases power resilience. If you have a diesel generator and you run it when the power goes out, that's actually very expensive electricity. You might run it for 60, maybe 100 hours per year. The capital cost of that diesel generator has to be recovered in 100 hours per year. When you put in a battery, you can charge it every day using low-cost solar power in the middle of the day when the solar power is available, and then discharge it in the evening when there's no solar power available and the price of electricity is higher. And that price arbitrage gets you a payback on the battery, which you would never get with a diesel generator. So it's much, much lower cost of resilience, much lower cost of ownership to have battery systems. And so we are seeing a lot more deployment of battery energy storage systems in microgrids for retail sites, for college campuses, for hospitals and schools, and for military bases, and in factories, including in our own factories. And even for net zero economic zones, where regions that have high levels of renewables are putting in the battery so they can run 100% of the time on renewable power, and then the products that are made there can claim that they have a zero carbon footprint. So we're seeing a lot of this, and some of these topics are explored in the white paper that we have just written. We're working on circularity solutions and plastics recycling, and some of that work is also happening here in Gurugram, where we're working with Professor Vasudevan from Madurai on technologies for using plastics recycling and incorporating recycled plastics into roads. And then hydrogen. We're going to talk a lot about hydrogen this evening. Hydrogen is a clean burning fuel because when you burn hydrogen, you only get water. You have to have well-designed burners to make sure you don't have any nitrogen oxide formation. But we make burners and we have solved that problem. We already have burners that give lower NOx when you burn hydrogen than you would get when you're burning natural gas. But you need to make the hydrogen. And there are two ways of doing that, blue hydrogen and green hydrogen. Blue hydrogen is hydrogen from natural gas with carbon capture. Green hydrogen by electrolysis of water. And we have the technologies for both of these, and we're working with partners around India to commercialize them. And then lastly, carbon capture and sequestration and utilization, taking CO2 from flue gases or out of the air and then either injecting it underground or in a place like India where you have a lot of solar power, reacting it with green hydrogen to convert it into useful chemicals. And then lastly, sustainable building technologies. As an automation business, we have been in the building sector for a very long time. Honeywell technology is in over 10 million buildings worldwide. And We use our building control systems to optimize the energy consumption of buildings, to make sure that they have a clean, healthy, breathing environment, and increasingly also to optimize the charging of electric vehicles so that the building, when people come to the building and they plug in their electric cars, their electric motorcycles, it doesn't spike the energy consumption. It doesn't create an additional demand for transformers. So it helps the building to actually regulate the charging. And of course, put many buildings together and you have a city. And India has been a pioneer in developing smart cities. We see the next generation of that technology as making those smart and sustainable cities. So building on the infrastructure that is already there to then make the cities more sustainable and to reduce their carbon footprint. So it is a very exciting time to be an engineer, particularly at Honeywell. We have a saying that you see in some of our branding, the future is what we make it. And we call our engineers our future shapers. Many of us love working for this company because we have the opportunity to touch so many of these technologies and to really transform the way we live, the way we manufacture things, the way we travel, to build a more sustainable future. When you add the impact of all of these things together, across all the technologies I described, between 2023 and 2030, we expect that through our customers, we will avoid 2 billion tons of CO2. That's 175 times the whole emissions that Honeywell will have over the same time period, equivalent to 33 million American homes, and it would be a lot more than 33 million Indian homes because India is much more energy efficient than the United States. So we believe we really are having an impact through these technologies, and we are very grateful for you being here with us this evening to hear about this and to explore ways in which these technologies can be applied to accelerate India's own journey to sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gavin, for that insightful session. Can I please request Mr. Ranjit Kulkarni, Vice President and General Manager, Energy and Sustainability Solutions, Honeywell, to please join us on stage and present a small token of appreciation to Dr. Gavin. Have Mr. Kulkarni here with us on stage. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my absolute honor to invite the stalwart who has been steering India's energy policy towards sustainability. It is my privilege and, of course, an honor to invite our chief guest of the evening, Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, Union Minister for Petroleum and Natural Gas. I would also like to invite on stage CNBC-TV18's Managing Editor, Shireen Bhan, for a fireside chat with our Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. What an absolute pleasure it is to welcome on stage Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri. Sir, please take a seat. Thank you so much. Once again, I know it's a busy time, but we truly appreciate you joining us here this evening to take us through where things currently stand on the energy transition that India is hoping to make, and more importantly, what the road ahead looks like.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for the Minister for joining us here this evening. Before we talk about the energy transition, Mr. Puri, let me start by asking you about what we are seeing happen as far as the crude markets are concerned. We've seen an almost 7 to 8% drop just this week. That bodes well for economies like India, I'm guessing that makes you a much more relieved man, given the fact that there's so much volatility and uncertainty, but crude heading lower, and the expectation is it will remain lower given the fact that OPEC and OPEC Plus have decided now not to go in for the production cuts.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me for this interactive session. Just as an opening comment, my sense of relief doesn't just depend on where international oil prices are, because the real world out there is a little more complex, but I think yours is a very focused question. And whilst it's true that international prices have remained steady and declined, I would say, I choose my words very carefully, I wouldn't say appreciably, because there is a part of me, because I happen to be the line minister of a country which is dependent on imports up to 88%. So there's a part of me which says that they should come down further. But then there are parts of me, like two of my companies, ONGC and Oil India Limited, who were telling me the other day, ye to bahut kam bahut niche aa gaya, hamari profit. So it's a very complicated world out there. What I look for, and that's where my relief comes, that in the midst of global turbulence, and there's no shortage of that. You and I have discussed this in the past, the ongoing military operations between the Russian Federation and Ukraine, the fairly high levels of tension between the State of Israel, Iran, the Middle East generally, periodic attacks by, non-state actors.
Yes.
I use the word carefully. Why is it that in spite of all that, prices have remained steady and declined? My understanding is that the market factors all this in already, but the real issue is the economic situation, I think, in the world's second largest economy. If you have a $19 trillion economy and that gives you the impression, and I'm not taking names, you see, it's ultimately demand and supply.
Yes.
And I was very encouraged by your reference just now to OPEC having decided not to undertake production cuts. Hey, wait a minute. We had a production daily of 102 million barrels per day.
Yes.
They reduced their production by 5 million. I've seen statements by OPEC Plus to the effect that they will unwind those production cuts. Now, I'm on your side. If after the drop in oil prices, will they still, and I'm not tempting anybody, but I'd like to see, because they've told me at a bilateral level that they will, unwind. There are two things that I'm interested in. There is more oil in the market available. There's no shortage of availability. The price levels are maintained essentially on account of artificial holding back.
Right.
If the total amount of oil which is available in the world is allowed to be available, then I think we'd be in a slightly more comfortable situation. We have so far, Shireen, navigated the terrain reasonably well. We've ensured availability. On that, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
We have ensured affordability. And I have a few things to tell you about that, no doubt. And on top of that, we've managed a fairly significant green transition on all fronts.
Thank you very much for very comprehensively setting the context of the balancing act. And you're very right in pointing out that, especially as far as the oil and gas sector is concerned, you do have a balancing act, because you do have to keep in mind the interests of the companies that report to you as well. But let's talk about the energy transition, sir. And one of the decisions, in fact, the first decision taken by the cabinet in the third term of the government was the solar rooftop scheme that the Prime Minister announced, and it got the cabinet approval and the cabinet nod. So it's very clear that this continues to be an area of priority for the government, both in terms of bandwidth as well as in terms of government resources. Now, lay out for me what you believe have been the major milestones achieved so far. And in terms of targets, we just had, Dr. Gavin talking about setting ambitious targets. And by the way, sir, that was a masterclass on, the energy transition. So thank you very much for highlighting, the world and how it is being reshaped by companies like Honeywell. But back to the question in terms of the targets that the government is working towards and what you believe the priorities now need to be.
First of all, on the balancing act, make no mistakes, I'm on the side of lower prices of oil. Because if you're 88% dependent on imports, obviously the interests of one or two companies, they're my friends, both in the public sector and the private sector, their interests will take second. If the prices come down further, as a country, we benefit, number one. Number two, the green transition, you mentioned the solar rooftops, very significant. That's a scheme which is, I think, very dear to the Prime Minister's heart, but it's one of many steps that he has taken. When he assumed responsibility in 2014, our total biofuel blending was 1.53%, if I remember correctly. Today, last month, I think we did 15.8%. We are today, in terms of biofuel blending, the second largest economy. I mean, Brazil, us, we've overtaken the United States in terms of sheer volumes because our population base, our consumption. By the way, 67 million people go to fill up at the retail stations every day. Yeah. Now, 67 million, 6.7 crore people, which means if your blending target is 20% by ethanol year ending October 2025, which is 1 year from now, we've already saved 99,000 crores on foreign exchange. We've given our farmers money. So it's a conversion of, you're turning the providers, your annadatas are also becoming urjadatas. They are becoming providers for it. So there are a lot of things going on. Biofuels, the feeds are increasing. Earlier it was just sugar and sugarcane juice based. Today you've got agricultural waste, parali. You're making it from bamboo. We're going to start very soon. You're making biofuels from industrial gases, third generation, hopefully very soon. Compressed biogas. You're increasing the feed. Maize has become, makkah has become a very important feedstock for biofuels. At the heart of all this, apart from whenever you're talking about sustainability, you're talking about the impact on the individual consumer.
Correct.
Now, if you have moved from, say, natural gas or cylinder gas, okay? Now, the difference, cylinder gas is made from crude oil and, refineries, etc. Natural gas comes from the Earth's surface. I was just doing a calculation today, and I immediately, when I was seeing that presentation, I said I must mention this to Shireen. So I've come with this statistic I want to share with you. Today, we have 33 crore total LPG connections in the country. And out of those 33 crore connections, we have, Shireen, 10 crore 35 lakh Ujjwala connections.
Correct.
We were calculating the cost of cooking medium, that is through the cylinder, for one family in a day. And I came across this figure which I checked, cross-checked. If you are a beneficiary of an Ujjwala connection, and you're getting the cylinder at 500 rupees, let's say for the purpose of calculation, then one family's cooking expenditure per day is little over 5 rupees, which is 7 cents. And if you are a non-Ujjwala beneficiary, if you are a normal cylinder, this thing, it is, I think, about 12 rupees, which is about little about 14 cents or so, depending on the dollar exchange rate. Where in the world, and by the way, if you have piped gas, then you're already 30% cheaper than that.
Yes.
Where in the world has a government, a democratically elected government, ensured this movement away from cooking on kerosene, coal, wet wood, and all in the span of 10 years? You know, when my friends in the opposition make a political point over, हमारे ज़माने में इतने की थी, अच्छा तुम्हारे ज़माने में तो cylinder था ही नहीं. I mean, we have a population of 1.4 billion. Let's say the population has remained, you know, given minus. Total number of cylinders in 2014 were hard. 14 crores. Today they're 33 crores and growing. And the Ujjwala wasn't there. Ujjwala is 10 crores. And Ujjwala, by the way, 80% of Ujjwala connections have gone to the rural areas, where the propensity to use firewood and coal is much higher than that. This is one. Second, coming back to your, and look, gas, we have what now? We have 1 crore 25 lakhs pipe gas connection. We have a pipeline of 22,000 kilometers, which we are going to take to 33,000 kilometers, which in effect will cover the entire nation. Okay? Now, again, you see, when oil prices fall, everybody is very happy, but there are two companies which will turn around and say, no, but we refine, we should. So there will be some guys who are dealers in cylinder gas who will say, no, we, you know, it should be a little longer, but we balance all that out. The rooftop scheme, if you look at the basic philosophy, whom are you benefiting? You're benefiting the household which has a rooftop solar panel.
Yeah.
You're going to provide, by the way, you're going to give them a subsidy to acquire the panel.
Yes.
Then you say you use 300 units for your own consumption, and the excess that you get, you put a charging station so that you can charge your vehicle, two-wheeler, three-wheeler, four-wheeler, and the excess on top of that you can put into the grid. Now, how is this changing the landscape? My first submission to you, ma'am, is that it has already changed the landscape. Secondly, the solar top is going to do wonders in terms of the enthusiasm with which it's being received, what I see as the rollout. Where are we going next? My own view is that whilst all this is being discussed, green hydrogen, which I regard as the fuel of the future, that is making its impact felt.
I'll get to green hydrogen in just a second, Mr. Puri. Let's address a couple of the issues that you raised, and let's start by talking about the gas economy, because as you pointed out yourself, we've seen a big shift as far as the gas economy is concerned. On CNG specifically, you know, given the fact that automakers now are also looking at the possibility of using CNG for vehicles more and more beyond just the four-wheelers, and now onto two-wheelers, we've got the first two-wheeler being launched as well. Are you looking at a significant CNG network expansion also?
Absolutely. First, the gas economy per se. I think when we took a decision that we were going to use, or rather increase the use of gas in our energy mix from 6% to 15%, a lot of people were initially somewhat skeptical. And I use the word skeptical, but say, well, this requires a investment about $500 billion. Where is it going to come from? But as we are moving along, you see it's coming. There was a second issue related to this, which was not so often discussed. Is gas really a green fuel? Is it green? And I think we got over that very quickly, because any determination of what is green is in relative terms. And everybody, I think, came to the conclusion is gas is as green as you can be, but compared to cooking coal and kerosene and wet wood, it's absolutely, desirable. Today, the fact that internationally more and more gas is likely to be available. Again, I'm choosing my words very carefully because you don't know how the market develops. So we have dealt with issues relating to pricing. Earlier we had a difficulty because we were using a formula which was based, I think, on 4 hubs. And it was very, once in 6 months you did the calculation.
Correct.
We changed all that. We brought it down to 2. We introduced a floor and a ceiling. And today gas prices have been, by and large, very stable. But again, it's a commodity of which we just definitely need more immediately because you have to prioritize its availability between different competing sectors of the economy.
Yes.
I mean, there's compressed gas, what you call city gas. There's the requirement of the fertilizer sector, and a whole host of them.
Yeah.
I am reasonably optimistic today that in the coming years, again, I don't want to be too sick, we are now in 24, 25 to 2025 will certainly be a bit of a challenge, but come 26, 27, the overall supply of gas will be there. Coming to your question on CNG cars, I must confess, in the 3 years that I've been here, initially I was a little worried because gas prices were going very high.
Yeah.
And I said that if some automobile manufacturers have to base their commercial decisions on how much to invest in which sector, will they pull back from CNG? And I'm very happy to inform you they didn't. Today, more and more CNG vehicles are coming on the market. And I think the experience of anyone who has a vehicle which is not entirely fossil fuel. I mean, today you have got vehicles which are electric partly and partly using petrol.
Yeah.
But I think the hybrid next generation is going to be the main thing that you, up to 40 kilometers, the electric battery is working. After that, you will be using biofuels, ethanol, and the cost is very, very, very. Even others who are driving electric vehicles, they all, they're not just enamored because of the novelty of it or the technology, but also it's a
the
more
cost of ownership.
cost-effective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Since you're talking about electric vehicles, let me address that issue as far as electric vehicles are concerned. What we're seeing world over today is a tapering down of the subsidies being provided to the electric vehicle space, and that has certainly impacted demand. We are awaiting clarity on whether we are going to see FAME 3 in the same avatar or in a different avatar. We were expecting it to happen around the budget or post the budget. It's still taking a bit longer. Is it likely to be reshaped significantly from its previous avatar, sir?
If you're talking about subsidies and money coming out of the exchequer for that, I'm the wrong guy to talk to. I think you should invite one of my colleagues dealing with the subject. But no, let me put it this way. This personal view, the viability and success of any of these schemes will be real, and it is real, when it is viable in and of itself. It should not be dependent on a subsidy scheme, because then it's a little artificial. I think we've done very well. We have moved from an era of generally available subsidies to more specific targeted subsidies. When you talk of green hydrogen, the fact that 19,700 crores was set aside for
The PLI.
PLI for electrolyzers is a case in point.
Yeah.
Now, what do you need to do? I think FAME 3, it will be rolled out. What is the mechanics? What are the amounts itself, etc.? I think what one needs to acknowledge is that the government has played it right. I mean, there has been a rollout, there has been encouragement, but you know, how much more will get into that? I am these days going through a very interesting exercise because, you know, we have gone from a system or situation of anxiety when I was told broken rice is not available, when I was told, sugar is not going to be available. Now everything is available in abundant quantity and everybody wants a better price for this thing. They will point out to, how the increases have taken place, what is the formula. And I, of course, jokingly tell them, hey, wait a minute, if everybody is going to get an increasing price, then I hope somebody doesn't reach the conclusion that, listen, it's cheaper for me to refine crude oil and provide petrol than to make ethanol. I'm saying it in a lighter way.
Yeah.
But it's a very healthy system which can have this discussion at 15.9% of ethanol fuel blending. Equally with the other things, electric vehicles, international blip has taken place, I think, for a variety of factors. Some of the larger users, like these mass transportation companies like, I don't want to take any names, they have had slightly little bit doubts because the issues, if you are having a fleet of 3,000 cars, then you look at not only the cost of running, but you also look at the cost of maintenance.
Right.
You look at other things. But believe me, I travel quite extensively. I think that technology change is here.
Yeah.
Even when we do projections on how much of fossil fuel are you going to use, let's say in 2040, everybody makes a healthy allowance for the fact that there will be alternate fuels, there will be electric vehicles, etc. So the direction is there. So once the direction in terms of the trajectory is clear, occasional up and down will be subsumed by that.
Well, let me ask you your opinion on the comment that came in from your colleague, Mr. Gadkari, Mr. Puri, where he said...
I think that's very unfair for you to ask me. No, but I'll happily answer.
Because it is something that, again, has been on the table for a long time, whether there should be disincentives for the use of diesel, and he's
look, listen, Mr. Gadkari is my senior colleague. He's also politically, a very tall leader, etc. So, I have the highest respect for him. But I think that remark, I don't want to interpret the remark, but I think I know where the remark came from. I mean, anyone who is in the transportation-related business, whether you make roads, highways, or you do that, you want to move into cleaner fuels.
Yeah.
So you want to use diesel for agriculture purposes, you want to use diesel, and you want the vehicles to be more that way. So I think the comment which got attention was that we will tax it out of or some, I don't know. But but this is all, but it took just few hours and then it was very clear. I personally, by the way, he's not the only one. A lot of people in individual capacity have talked about it. But that's not government policy. Government policy is as it is rolled out. And tell me, we all want to move into a situation where the use of fossil fuels, crude, look, with the best will in the world, I don't see it going away. I mean, I've been doing calculations. Today we are using 88% import dependence on the amount of crude oil that we use. Let's say our domestic E&P goes up, which I'm sure it will. We are making those efforts. Still, I think for the next 20, 25 years, it's going to be around. So any policy predictions that we make on what we are using will have to take that into account, that is what is going to here to stay. Which means even though there are more electric vehicles, even though there are more hybrid vehicles which use biofuels and this thing. By the way, Mr. Gadkari also demonstrates the use of a hybrid vehicle. First, Mirai, and the other day I saw a high-cross Innova, which is a very good political statement to make.
Yes, he's been a big believer in the biofuel story for
100%.
for very long.
He's one of the strongest pillars of support to get. PM has been vetted and he did all that, and Mr. Gadkari and several of my colleagues, we're all committed to it.
No, absolutely. One of the other aspects that was being talked about, and again, that's being prioritized by the government by way of PLI schemes, etc., the battery storage aspect and the battery storage systems as well. Mr. Puri, if you can give us some sense of what we should now expect in light of the measures that have already been taken.
Look, I can tell you battery storage for green hydrogen, pump storage, you have to produce those on a large scale in order to make these kind of fuels workable. In the case of green hydrogen, let me tell you, what you do is you take water up to a height several thousand feet and you drop it from there. You produce the electricity. That electricity then you use in order to produce green hydrogen. So it requires large acreage, and the companies which are involved in it with foreign investment are setting up these 3,000-acre sites along the coastline. When it comes to green hydrogen, I'm sorry I'm going away from battery storage,
not at all.
to green hydrogen. Green hydrogen succeeds or will succeed. It's a fuel of the future. You need to bring the cost down, and you can only bring the cost down provided you manufacture on scale in places where there is large demand, where you can produce it and you can consume it. Because the gas in and of itself does not lend itself to transportation. Maybe the green ammonia does, and therefore those companies are setting up export targets. But all in all, on all these fronts, apart from the availability and affordability, the green transition, whether it is, you're talking about solar panels, rooftop panels, you're talking about biofuels. By the way, I have no hesitation in saying that, at least in my mind, we are no longer looking at a 20% ceiling on biofuel blending. The 20% was put there because that 20% is the figure at which the existing parts of the components of the automobile don't need to be changed.
Right.
But today you can go into a filling station and get a kit which will help you in case there's a problem. And it's like the chicken and egg. If the feed becomes available, then the automobile manufacturers who are
Absolutely.
selling automobiles which are using a higher blend will also be on sale here. They're on sale in countries like Brazil and elsewhere. They'll also become available. So going forward, the entire ecosystem, sometimes you get the feeling one part of it is slightly slower than the other, but it depends on that. By the way, we are selling E20 mixed fuel in 15,000 stations around the country. We are also selling E100, that is 100% ethanol in several states. I think 4 states. And we are waiting for people to come and consume it. What could you consume it for? You could consume it on a cooktop in the kitchen. You could consume it, you can retrofit your tractors to move away from diesel usage to this thing. In all that, we will have to maintain the economic viability. If you produce something but you make it very expensive, nobody's going to buy it. So our real success has lied in the fact that whether it is gas for cooking purposes, domestic cooking, or gas cylinders even for commercial purposes, or any other thing. By the way, we are the only country in the world where the prices of petrol and diesel over a 2-year representative period actually came down. Now the challenge is to keep them that way.
No, speaking of challenges, sir, let me end with that. In terms of reimagining, the companies that you look after, the refiners as well as the oil marketing companies, as we move into an era of renewable energy, as we move more and more aggressively on the energy transition roadmap and the energy transition targets, how do you reshape companies like ONGC, companies like BPCL, HPCL, GAIL, so on and so forth, because that will be a challenge as well.
First of all, you've already witnessed their transformation from typical public sector units to highly profitable, modern entities. I mean, combined profits, 1,59,000 crores of these companies. I mean, this is unheard of a few years ago. Somebody was jokingly telling me, "This sab PSUs ka bada." So I said, "PSUs ka itna bada, iska itna bada." So I mean, that's my sales stock as a line minister. No, but Total is now Total Green. Today somebody came to see me, a former colleague of mine. He said, "I want to do something ONGC has floated." That's ONGC Green. They floated it. So all of them will make the transition. But you also don't want to make them a totally sustainable green energy transition when your dependence on traditional fuels is going to be around for a longer. So that will take place seamlessly. By the way, again, I used to have this joke with my erstwhile colleague who used to say, "Ki hum ye kar denge, MNRE, kya kehte hai?" I said, electricity only accounts for 17% of our energy uses. Green hydrogen will succeed because green hydrogen will be used in my refineries. And one of the oil companies which has 11 refineries had already using green hydrogen, making it for 2. He had promised me before retirement to do another 2. I must get hold of his successor. So we are all moving in that direction.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Puri, for making it very clear the direction that we're heading in and the next steps and what the future looks like. We wish you the very best of luck as you navigate a very difficult, a very challenging environment, a very difficult global environment. And we look forward to hearing more from you on each of these issues that you've given us a very comprehensive snapshot on. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri, a big round of applause. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us here this evening.
I only want to say it's always a pleasure to interact with you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you, sir, and Shireen for that power-packed session. Sir, before you leave us, may I now invite on stage Mr. Ashish Modi, President Honeywell India, to present the Honourable Minister with a small token of appreciation for taking the time out today to join us at the India Energy Transition Summit. take their seats. We are moving on to our next session. Ladies and gentlemen, now with that, it's time for our first panel discussion of the day titled Beyond Carbon, the Rise of Green Hydrogen. Now, this session will explore green hydrogen's pivotal role in India's sustainable future, covering its potential, production, challenges, and of course, the future impact. And to moderate this discussion, may we please have on stage Ashmit Kumar, editor, CNBC TV18. A round of applause for him, please. And let's also welcome our distinguished panelists for this discussion. Derek Shah, Senior Vice President, L&T. Ashish Modi, President, Honeywell, India. And Kaustubh Kulkarni, Senior Country Officer, India, Vice Chair, Asia Pacific, JP Morgan. Over to you, Ashmit.
What a power-packed discussion that was. I think Minister Puri, any hall that he enters, any room that he enters, he exudes confidence about the way forward. And I think he's given us a fantastic cue when he's talking about green hydrogen as being the fuel of the future. So interesting takeaways. And of course, Shireen is always giving us that power-packed discussion. But let's take cue from what the guidance that the minister today gave us. And let's begin with talking about emergence of green hydrogen. Let me begin by asking you, Mr. Modi. I'll just open the floor up to all the panelists just to set the context, just to set the ball rolling. When we speak of green hydrogen, it's one of the latest kids on the block. It's like the Gen Z of fuels. So when you look at the Gen Z, this latest fuel, where does it sit in the galaxy of fuels, in the basket of fuels that we currently have, especially when we compare it against some of the more conventional alternatives? What do we mean when we say emergence of hydrogen as a replacement for carbon?
Yeah, thanks, Ashmit. Look, I mean, if you look at the pure offering of green hydrogen and why it's so attractive is that there's no carbon in hydrogen. And therefore, naturally, it is a very attractive fuel. The challenge, however, is that hydrogen is a tough fuel. And it is tough because it's a small molecule. It is in some sense hard to handle, but it can really revolutionize the entire world, should it work. And therefore, to your question around where it sits in the basket of things, and if you look at India and what India is doing, and when I compare it to a lot of the other economies, India has put a stake in the ground to say we are going to go green hydrogen. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a brilliant move because India has abundant solar. And what's needed, the biggest cost that is needed to produce green hydrogen is actually electricity. And there's other costs associated with the capex part. But given that electricity is a big part of the cost structure, and India has abundant solar, you've solved one part of the equation. Having said that, you still have a long way to go to bring the cost down. And I think in my mind, if I were to pick one thing to begin with for us to be successful as the country, it's solving for the cost. And if you're able to solve it to a point where it becomes a switching fuel with respect to many other fuels, it can really revolutionize the world. And that's where it stands today. But again, there's a long way to go in terms of where we need to get to.
Sure. In fact, you correctly pointed out it's a long journey from this point on. Mr. Shah, of course, being a critical part of that journey in taking this fuel forward. Give us your sense, opening remarks, emergence of green hydrogen.
So I think the Honorable Minister very, very correctly stated, that it's not only to be considered as a fuel, because right now you have a basket of fuels, and he very correctly said that there's going to be the other fuels also which will coexist. So the emergence is possibly more if you look at hydrogen as a feedstock. And that's important because typical fuel, replacement of a conventional fossil fuel with hydrogen will take time. But what will happen is the feedstock, like what he said, my oil marketing companies, they use gray hydrogen. So that's a feedstock. So where do you use green hydrogen as a feedstock? In fertilizers, in steel plants, and many others. So I think rather than just categorizing it as a fuel, naturally it is a fuel of the future, but in the present context, I would rather look at it more like a feedstock, which actually is an input to many of the industries.
Interesting insights. Mr. Kulkarni, coming to you, give us the big money view. How, as this fuel develops, how is big money looking at it?
I think before big money, if you look at the countries, and India clearly is an important one, but as of now, there are 53 countries who have a stated hydrogen policy in terms of targets that they want to achieve for hydrogen to contribute a certain portion in terms of volume for their energy chain. Which means I think it's one of the more interesting energy transition sources that number of important countries in the world, including the largest energy consumers, are actively focused on. So that's one. When that happens, and when governments actually set some of these important agendas, and then the governments also follow up through interesting schemes to scale up the business, financing generally follows. So what we are now seeing is early stages of, I think, the governments in many parts of the world setting up programs for manufacturing, setting up volume targets, and therefore financing is coming in. And therefore we do think, particularly 2024, 2025, is a big time where hydrogen transitions into becoming more mainstream from a financing perspective. And finally, I think as Derek mentioned, I also think any fuel generally, it's very difficult for fuel to be or offering the prospect of reasonable fixed cost. I think hydrogen or green hydrogen has the possibility of offering a reasonable fixed cost source, and that is extremely important for a very intense energy dependent country like India.
Interesting thoughts. Let's bring this conversation back to some of the points that we were just discussing. The Honorable Minister was alluding to it. You made a reference to it in the opening remarks as well. The critical question of becoming cost competitive. Let me get your insights. Not looking for a figure, but a ballpark. What are we looking at when we talk of making this fuel cost competitive? And is there a role for technology to play there?
Yeah, I can start, and of course, Derek will have a lot to weigh in here. But look, there are different numbers that have been thrown around in terms of, the dollar per kg at which hydrogen will become really attractive. It's all the way from $2 to $6, there's a big range. And that's, the answer varies for different people, for different situation or application in different countries. And the key question is, what are you really switching? And at that price, it becomes relevant for that country or that situation or that company. And that's the answer. It's not one answer, unfortunately. Coming back to your question around what role technology has to play, the answer is simple. It's big. From a Honeywell perspective, when we look at the full green hydrogen value chain, there are many spots where we play in. I'll just talk about one of them. We are a 100-year-old controls and automation company, which means that we can control anything. We can control any value chain, any process, anything. And, with green hydrogen, it's a new paradigm because when you look at the input of a green hydrogen production, it's largely solar. And the solar power is intermittent, as we know. If there's a cloud, the solar power goes down, and so on and so forth. There is no solar in the night. And therefore, the way you control such process is different than how controls has been done in the past. Because you have a big power intermittency, as we call it, issue. If you also look at the thermals, if you look at the transients, it's very different for green hydrogen production. And therefore, from our perspective, one of the key areas of contribution in the entire value chain is how do you actually control the green hydrogen production such that the cost comes down, such that you can increase the life of electrolyzers, which is the other big cost. I mentioned electricity is a big cost. The second big cost is electrolyzer itself. How do you increase the life and degradation of electrolyzers so that when you do a levelized cost of hydrogen in its life cycle, it comes down? So we have a very important role, and we are just one part of the equation in terms of technology. But the simple answer is technology has a massive role to play in bringing the cost down.
Same question, Mr. Shah, to you. You're an important part of that journey, bringing down the costs.
I think this is a question which we are grappling it on a day-to-day basis, naturally. And then we look at the cost, kind of holistically. It's, the people over here are pretty familiar that cost of green hydrogen, a large part, more than 60% of it is basically cost of energy, the green energy. So naturally, the cost of hydrogen or green hydrogen is dependent on how cheap and how can we get the green energy, including what The Honorable Minister spoke about how do you store, the types of storage. But yes, there are other aspects, the technology, efficiency. I think, the electrolyzers, more and more you make it efficient, the cost keeps coming down, the technology plays a role. And to that extent, I believe whatever Larsen & Toubro is doing is a phenomenal thing. Not only are we manufacturing electrolyzers, we are doing a material science, research to find out metallurgy of the anodes, cathodes to make the electrolyzers way more efficient. So we use less power to produce the same quantum of hydrogen. That makes the cost down. Another aspect is obviously the regulations, because the regulations also play a big role in terms of how do you get the cost down, because there are obviously a plethora of taxes, cross subsidies, electricity duty, and many other things. And the entire ecosystem has to be, right from the policies to the manufacturing to the power to the technology. And then there's a bigger subject also of the definition of green. Europe defines it differently. You have the hourly correlation. Maybe Japan and Korea could be a monthly correlation. Correlation is this, that means you have to keep matching when you produce power, when you consume, can you accumulate it, can you bank it and use it? All that is a cost. If you are able to bank it and use it a month later. So I think such a complex subject of how to, so what he was very correctly telling, Ashish, it's not a number. Is it $3.50? Is it $2? No. Relative to what? And also the last point was, related to what? What are we comparing the cost? To natural gas, which is again, market-driven, bench-priced, against Brent, against dollar. Whereas if you put green, you got to fix it for 25 years. You've got your capital fixed. You've got your power fixed. Lock the price for 25 years. So cost is a very relative term. Where are you and how do you actually evaluate and what do you actually say?
Let me, in fact, ask you a supplementary question, and this is as a part of that journey in terms of making it more mainstream, more cost-effective, the role that the government needs to play here. We've seen the National Green Hydrogen Mission. We have a lofty target, that's 5 MMTA till by 2030. We have a PLI scheme, a big war chest. We're talking about 20,000 crores nearly. Yeah, you're front and center as far as that conversation is concerned, the role that the government needs to play in this journey.
Yeah. So I think the government has shown a huge, I would say, intent to play a big role. The hydrogen mission, the kind of, the budget that was announced, figures, PLI. We are, kind of watching it with a kind of a real sense of anticipation that these have to play out. That means once the intent is there, the PLI is there, then how does it play out? Because then the demand has to be also to be, kind of mandated to the respective industries. So we have seen the 3 tenders that have come out, the 2A, 2B, and the tranche 2, where the oil marketing companies, we can see now HPCL, BPCL, CPCL, all of them have come out with tenders. We have to, the 200 KTPA of green hydrogen in, tender 2B is a very, very, I would say, important part we are watching. For the last 2.5 years, the hydrogen mission was announced, the policies were announced, but now the real time has come. The tenders have been floated, and based on the participation and the manner in which it will get actually executed, we'll see the action on the ground. So the important part is, it's not only creating the, kind of policies, but mandating certain industries, because today, green hydrogen, given a choice, no industry wants to transition. There's a cost of transition. Every refinery produces and uses gray hydrogen. What is the incentive for them to go into green? Because naturally green is, as on date, going to be costlier than gray. So there has to be a bridging gap that has to be provided, and the government is doing that. Similarly, the fertilizers, possibly similarly the steel, and similarly other industries. So there has to be a hand-holding, bridging of the gap. Many other countries are doing it. You can see that Japan has come out with a CFD, $20 billion, and for the first tranche of Europe has come out with the first 900 million euro for the Hindco tenders. They are talking about 3 billion euros for the next. So every country, every region is coming out with its kind of huge state support And I'm very sure our government is also doing that, and we look at it.
Mr. Kulkarni, let me take that point across to you. Some very strong points being made with respect to the bridging of the gap, state support being required there, more guidance needed from the government in terms of mandates for the industry to help transition. When we were speaking earlier, you had referred to there being a shepherd-like approach that the government now needs to make in the journey to 2030. Your thoughts on the role of the government?
I think the way at least we track all of the developments across the globe in JP Morgan, I think this is one sector which is nascent relatively everywhere in the world. It is also a sector which is going to be very relevant and therefore offers Indian companies the opportunity to be globally competitive and globally relevant in what is a very promising energy source. In that context, I'll just bring the attention to three key interesting bits, which is the role that the government is playing on the cost. If you look at what has happened in UK, the Europe hydrogen banking, where the bid price discovery in terms of support was very, very competitive at 0.5 euro to 5 euro per kg. And the bid price support basis this scheme that the government has announced for 5 million tons in India is 0.2 to 0.3 dollar per kg. So which means Indian companies who have bid for the support are able to compete and supply for domestic or international consumption with very little minimal support, but still that minimal support is able to help them scale up. So I think the important point is the government is playing an enabling role to scale up. Each of these companies are drawing up their plans. And the other key thing is if you look at any major international hydrogen supply contract discussion, whether it relates to Europe, whether it relates to Africa, Australia, or Japan, there is always some Indian link or Indian company who is looking to bid, looking to win, and they have one, which also means that while it is still early, Indian companies are making very good progress in being globally relevant at this stage itself. And therefore, with some of this support, we do think it will allow the businesses to scale up much better.
Interesting thoughts. Mr. Modi, let me come to you now. One of the aspects that the panelists in different course of their answers have alluded to has been the question of inducing demand. How do we do that? It's not an easy answer. You've mentioned there are challenges in terms of handling of the fuel, transport of the fuel. One issue that Mr. Shah pointed out was in terms of how do you mandate, how do you get the industry to transition? Why would I transition? So where do we get that demand from? Are there specific sectors that can provide that support mechanism for the fuel?
I wish I had a great answer to this, but I'll give it a shot. Look, I think when the green hydrogen mission was announced for the 5 TPA, I think we had a bit of clarity around where this will get consumed, which is around the fertilizers, green ammonia, and I think that 5 TPA is sorted, if I can say that. I mean, at least until 2030, we have a clarity of path. If you read the green hydrogen mission, it also talks about starting to use green hydrogen for transportation. To me, that is the second step, if you will, in the demand generation for the country. And if we are able to do that, I think then there's a lot of hope. Now, if you look around, do we have transportation that are purely on green hydrogen today? The answer is no. But are people experimenting and trying, and have people been successful? The answer is yes. Several companies have announced use of hydrogen, and they started off by saying, okay, we'll go pure green hydrogen, but now they're talking about green hydrogen and ice, H2 ice, for example. So I think the solutions are evolving and the technology is making progress for us to be able to create that demand, let's say the second stream of demand. And the third one I would say, which is very real and relevant today, is the export market. If you look at Australia, you look at Japan, and you look at Europe, we see those three as hubs for consumers of green hydrogen today, and that they were mentioned. And again, with Honeywell, we have technologies which we are actually commercializing to companies who are willing to transport hydrogen produced here or anywhere else to another location, which is long distance. And we call it liquid organic hydrogen carriers, which are toluene-based solutions that can actually do it in a very cost-effective way and in a very efficient way. So I think that is the third stream. But I would also say that for India, if India were to succeed, they have to look inward and domestic, and Kaustav is a big proponent of that. He mentioned that when we were talking last, that absolutely if India has to succeed, it has to succeed domestically first and then do the exports.
Mr. Kulkarni, just taking that conversation forward, where does the demand lie? Demand versus exports, is it more local before we actually progress to exports?
See, for this particular, you can look at both big projects, and I think we should also look at small projects. And the reason that we should also look at small projects is while almost 85% of the demand for green hydrogen consumption are the three areas that Ashish outlined, but the remaining 15-16% is also in relation to sectors like pharma, chemicals, specialty chemicals, all of the other use cases in manufacturing where there is an existing established supply chain for natural gas consumption, existing supply chain that is already there, and the propensity and ability for these companies to pay a bit more is there. Equally, they'll be very disciplined in the cost. So we have to think through, and we do think actually in the Indian context, demand and therefore sources of green hydrogen manufacturing will get distributed. It will get created in large mega scales, and some of the large companies which are developing those, and also in smaller projects where there'll be clusters for green hydrogen consumption and distribution locally that will be relevant, because bulk of our manufacturing for the remaining 15-16% of the clusters that I mentioned are in defined areas. So therefore, we could see a very, very efficient hydrogen ecosystem that could develop in the country over the next 4 to 5 years.
I would like to take this because, see, globally, around 95 to 100 million tons of hydrogen is already being produced, and it's not green. We are talking about hydrogen, and typically most of it is gray. In India, are almost 6 to 7 million tons. So it's not that the country is not using. Where is this 6 to 7 million ton being used? And these are low-hanging fruits. Rather than trying to search new industries, we need to find industries which are already using, and these are the big ones, the refineries and the fertilizer. So the first ones where we should target, and the government is looking at, is these two industries there. That means the refineries and fertilizers. Naturally, there are the others which are the hard to abate. In the hard to abate, as it was very clearly told, and also Ashish said, is the one like the steel, where hydrogen is not a feedstock, but you're trying to replace part of the reductants like the coke and all that with hydrogen. So point you said is where should we look at? Very clearly, the oil and gas industry and the fertilizer industry are the ones we should be focused, and the government is very correctly doing that.
Fantastic. Mr. Modi, coming back to you on the issue of when we talk of global value chains, where does India sit as a part of this value chain? I remember going back to some of the conversations where we had earlier, where you said that while it may be a challenge because it's the Gen Z of fuels, it is also an opportunity for India to take leadership. Give us more light on that.
Yeah, I think I said that in my opening, because if India is really able to solve the cost position, I think naturally India takes the leadership position. And, several countries, if you look around, have taken this middle path of let's do blue hydrogen. Let's take, natural gas and break it and produce hydrogen, and then we'll sequester the carbon and this and that. And that's like, to me, a middle path, and you're trying to be on both boats. But that's not really what India is doing. So what India has done is actually a very, very bold thing by saying we are going to commit ourselves to green hydrogen. So that's number one. In terms of what can be done in terms of where India sits in global value chain? Look, today, and again, I'll defer it to Derek to talk about it, and Costa, they see the global markets, and Derek is actually solving the problem. I'm just talking here. Is that we are making electrolyzers with the help of PLIs. I think India needs to own the technology versus become the system integrator or assembler of the technology by taking technology from different countries. I think that will change the game. And we have to lead with the fact that we are going to solve this problem for our domestic markets. We take that view, and we double down on the technology development versus reducing the cost because we are just the best assemblers. I think that's the position we need to take in this space because, mind you, we have an advantage. We have taken the space of saying we will go green hydrogen. And now we got to go the technology way. That's my view.
That's an interesting point about wanting India to be at the core of the technology rather than just merely being an outlier, being an assembler. Mr. Kulkarni, your quick thoughts, where India sits on the GVC?
I think I agree with Ashish that effectively owning and adopting the technology is going to be very important, and developing those technologies is also even more important. But the way I look at the GVC currently for India, Clearly, I think for renewable energy, India already is one of the cheapest place to produce renewable energy, particularly through a combination of solar and wind, just given the natural ecosystem we have. The other interesting advantage for us is the whole excitement about pump hydro storage systems, which is, I think, what Minister also talked about. India is one of the largest capacities from so attractive and competitive that you start setting the price rather than you taking the price. So I think that's really the journey that we need to track for India between now and 2030.
Mr. Shah, you sit at the core of the technology.
Yeah, so I think partly addressed here that the technology has to be owned, because at the end of the day, yes, we can't be, living on borrowed technology. A lot of work is being done, and as we go forward, with development of our own electrolyzers, even looking at, renewable and various combinations of the, other elements. The subject is not only going to be electrolyzers, it's going to be fuel cells and many others. So going forward, when these technologies and especially are available in India with companies and homegrown, because see, one of the issues is the technology. The other part is how do you indigenize it to manufacture those equipments without resorting to importing components. And there again, I believe that L&T has been doing a phenomenal job. Not only, obviously we have a technology which we have a license agreement with a European company, but what we have done is we have stripped the electrolyzer apart, and every component we are manufacturing it out of our L&T shops, Indian shops, and brought it down to only less than 5% we are, importing components. That's huge, because that makes the cost of the equipment come down and, helps us to cut the cost also. So that's the technology, indigenization, and further development of the same technology is going to be a big role.
Interesting. We're coming close to the end of this discussion, so I'll come to all of our panelists for one final comment, and I'll make this a forward-looking question in terms of how do we mainstream green hydrogen? How do we mainstream hydrogen? The current systems that we have don't provide for a plug-and-play solution, at least not as far as hydrogen is concerned. So what does this journey ahead looks like in terms of mainstreaming the fuel?
I think early stage in India, generally, we see intense competition. I think partnership or cooperation is going to be very important for India as a country to be successful. So that's my response.
Mr. Shah?
Yeah, so, partly I again refer to what the Honorable Minister said, that industrial use is going to be produce hydrogen where you're going to use it. So mainstream, how do we use it? The large industries have to produce it where they're going to use it.
So captive facilities.
Captive. But the other part is there has to be the distributed hydrogen, because if it is a mobility, so then it has to be, you have to produce it in multiple locations. There is this concept of, producing it at retail units, dispensing units, and you could have hundreds and thousands of them out in the country where, you could actually have hydrogen produced and also, use it. So I look at it this way, the aggregated form and the distributed form. And possibly that can produce a lot of penetration of hydrogen across.
Interesting thoughts. Mr. Modi.
My answer is simple. Get the cost down to replace natural gas. I think if you get the cost down to that levels, everything else will get done. The infrastructure will get built, everything will fall in place, the demand will come, you get the cost down, everything will fall in place.
I think those are such fantastic thoughts coming in, because right at the beginning of this evening, we've set the tone that that's the way forward, that for any movement forward, it's the cost component. I think that will be at the heart of demand, that will be at the heart of migrating, that will be at the heart of this journey forward. So on that note, I'd like to thank all of our panelists. This has been an engaging discussion. I hope for the purposes of this evening, it's helped in setting out a mandate in terms of what the key drivers will be and what the key challenges perhaps are. Mr. Shah, Mr. Modi, Mr. Kulkarni, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for such an engaging and thought-provoking discussion. We'll request you to please stay back to receive a small token of appreciation from our end. Requesting Mr. Modi and Ashmit to please do the honors. once again, panelists, for that session. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we now move to another very special address of the evening, which is on the goal of achieving 500 gigawatt renewable energy by 2030 by none other than the man who is at the helm of driving India's ambitious renewable energy targets. Please extend a very warm welcome to Shri Prahlad Joshi, Minister of New and Renewable Energy and Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution.
Good evening to all. Namaskar. Distinguished attendees and guests, the India Energy Transition Summit organized by Honeywell and CNBC-18 presents a vital and impactful platform dedicated to holding the meaningful discourse about the future of our energy landscape. I am happy to be here this evening addressing the gathering of the senior government officials, industry stalwarts, experts, media persons. मुझे तो ये कहा गया है कि बहुत ही important executives from private, government sector, everybody is here. तो मैं तो सिर्फ इसमें अभी 3 महीना हो रहा है, बाकी सब लोग आपसे हम मेरे से अच्छे जानते हैं. तो इस 3 महीने में और गत 10 साल में जो मोदी जी के सरकार में हुआ वो तो मैं थोड़ा कुछ शोकेस करने का कोशिश करता हूं. भाई मैं इतना कहना चाहता हूं शुरुआत में, I am open for the suggestions, feedback, and I can also very politely tell you that I am accessible, very easily accessible. You can meet me at any time. और मैं पहले कोल और माइन में था तब भी तो उधर जो बहुत ही एक बड़ा बदलाव हुआ है, प्रोडक्शन भी ज़्यादा हुआ है, माइनिंग में भी बहुत बड़ा बदलाव हुआ है. That is because even in that sector when I became minister I was not knowing anything, but I used to meet many people and the feedback of the stakeholders and people who are working on the ground. Because of that feedback, we were able to do that, and today we are very good in that sector as far as coal and mine is concerned. So having said that, I was informed that the summit would be bringing together diverse area of the participants, including the thought leaders, policymakers, industry experts, all together एक चिंतन मंथन होके आप जो कुछ भी आपको इधर फीडबैक मिलेगा, नहीं तो आपका रेजोल्यूशन होगा, वो तो आप मुझे बता सकते हैं. And I must say that I am thoroughly impressed by the list of the attendees and the participants जो मुझे दिया गया था. They are very very experts. That's why शुरुआत में मैंने कहा कि आप लोग तो सब जानते ही हैं, मुझे क्या ज़्यादा बोलने का ज़रूरत नहीं है. I am in the process of learning. Both the Honeywell and CNBC-18 deserve the heartfelt appreciation for putting together this evening for impactful dialogue and engagement. Honeywell is a pioneering, with its pioneering spirit in technology and sustainability. CNBC-TV18 with its insightful media reach, have combined their strength to create this dynamic platform for addressing the crucial energy and sustainability issues. This event exemplifies their shared commitment to advancing the sustainable progress and fostering an informed and proactive community. India today needs such a communities to carry its growth momentum forward. In a rapid evolving global energy landscape, it is crucial to talk about India's impressive journey towards the clean and sustainable energy solutions. There was once a time when sustainability initiatives were only associated with their Western world or China. India has significantly changed this narrative by emerging as the powerful force in the global sustainability arena. Imagine the Soneki Lanka, a symbol of advanced and a lavish progress. They had high norms led with their advanced technologies and extensive resources. This is, I am comparing to Soneki Lanka. India, like Prince Ram, after rigorous training and the preparation under the Guru Vishwamitra, focused on building the strength and capabilities in the renewable energy. Just as Rama emerged, Sri Ram, as a strong and decisive leader ready to challenge the might of the Lanka, India has risen as a powerful contender in the global energy landscape. India's energy consumption is the third highest in the world. As per the International Energy Agency, in 2024, India will post an 8% rise in the electricity consumption. This surge in demand highlights the critical need for a balanced approach that simultaneously addresses the energy security, employment creation, economic growth, and environment sustainability. And this is where renewable energy comes into play. As India's energy requires continue to grow, it becomes increasingly important to develop and implement the strategies to ensure the reliable and sustainable energy supply. Government under Prime Minister Shri Modi recognized the imperative of the energy transition and has made it a top priority. The government's commitment is reflected in the series of ambitious policies and initiatives designed to steer the country toward the more sustainable energy future. PM Suryaghar Muft Bijli Yojana. This is a win-win situation for the both. ऐसे ही फ्री देने से इलेक्ट्रिसिटी फ्री वो फ्री देने से आप लोग शायद देखे होंगे हिमाचल प्रदेश में क्या हो रहा है, कर्नाटक में क्या हो रहा है, लेकिन what is the model where common people and also poor people, they can get the free electricity but with some investment and with the support of the government. That is PM Suryaghar Muft Bijli Yojana. I have explained in detail in the parliament recently how it is free, but at the same time, where there will not be any burden on either DISCOM or the generating companies or to the government, but in spite of that, how it is free, I have explained it. That's why PM Suryaghar Yojana, one of the such a major scheme for installing the rooftop solar and providing free electricity up to 300 units every month for 1 crore household. This is the biggest scheme in the world. So far, 2.5 lakh rooftop solar systems have been installed under the PM Suryaghar Muft Bijli Yojana from June to till date. Overall, if we put together, now it is reaching nearly about 3.5 lakh. In the same way, PM Kusum for the subsidy up to 30 or 50% for the total cost towards the installation of the standalone solar pumps and also for the solarization of the existing grid-connected agricultural pumps. Since June, over 1 lakh standalone solar pumps have been installed. Viability gap funding scheme for the offshore wind energy projects an outlay of 7,453 crores. National Green Hydrogen Mission with a provision of rupees 19,744 crores to make India a leading producer and an exporter of the green hydrogen. In the second tranche, 11 companies have been awarded tenders after carrying out the transparent bidding process. A total capacity of 1,500 megawatt has been awarded. Let me also inform you that after the launch of National Green Hydrogen Mission, 13 states have notified their green hydrogen policy. With more states showing the interest, this number will go up in the coming days. Some other schemes include developmental of the solar parks, ultra mega solar power projects, PLI scheme, National Program on High Efficiency of Solar PV Modules, CPSU scheme phase 2 for setting up 12,000 megawatt grid-connected solar photovoltaic power projects, green energy corridor to create transmission system for the renewable energy projects. With these schemes, we are investing in emerging clean energy technologies that are essential for supporting India's long-term energy transition journey. The development and the deployment of the innovative technology will enhance the energy security and contribute to the environmental sustainability. By continuously pushing the envelope and the setting up the ambitious goals, India is demonstrating its leadership and resilience in the pursuit of the sustainable energy future. And it is only the natural way of the life for all Indians. Sustainability is deeply ingrained in India's traditional values and cultural practices. The concept of living in the harmony with the nature has been part of the Indian philosophy for centuries. The sun, Surya, wind, Vayu, water, Varuna are still considered not only as divine forces but as essential elements that support and sustain the life. Surya means energy, ye pehle se hum jante the. From the beginning, from the days of, from Veda Kala, Punya Kala, Purana Kala, there was a reference about the Surya and its energy. Our cultural background provides about this so much of importance to the Varuna. Today we are talking of the hydro, that is Varuna, water, Vayu, wind power. It is not just a divine forces, but essential element to support the sustainable life. The perspective gives a natural base for the modern sustainability practices. Our cultural backdrop provides a unique foundation for aligning modern energy practices with the traditional values. By drawing on these cultural aspects, India can enhance its approach to climate challenges and sustainability. Integrating traditional wisdom with a contemporary energy solution creates a holistic approach that respects both environment and cultural heritage. And this alignment can foster a greater public support and engagement, as it also appeals to the public to adopt the sustainable initiatives. By integrating these efforts into the broader growth strategy, India is working these efforts into the broader growth strategy. India is working to ensure that economic development and the environmental stewardship go hand in hand. This is where the reputed institutions such as Honeywell and CNBC-18 play a vital role. There are three pillars of sustainability. There are three pillars of sustainability. One, the government by its providing policy support and overall vision to the sector. Second, the corporate for driving innovation and implementation. Third, of course, the media for raising the awareness and encouraging the social action. The India Energy Transition Summit exemplifies the importance of such collaboration, providing a platform from the stakeholders to come together and discuss the strategies for sustainable future. I believe through ongoing dialogue and collective action, we can build a greener, more sustainable world for the future generations. I am confident that the conversation and the insight shared here will help us in identifying the strategies and innovation that can accelerate the progress. With these words, I thank the organizers and the participants for the rich deliberations. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any feedback or ideas to share that can take this sector further forward. Your input is essential in ensuring that our efforts are aligned with our goals and are continuously evolving. Our engagement will drive this sector and ensure the shared success. Together, let us turn this crucial into a transformative opportunity, leading the way towards the more sustainable, resilient future. Thank you. Dhanyavad.
Thank you so much, sir, for that compelling address and for highlighting the path towards a renewable energy. But before you leave us, I would request Mr. Ranjit Kulkarni, Vice President and General Manager, Energy and Sustainability Solutions, Honeywell India, to please present our Honorable Minister with a small token of appreciation. Once again, a huge round of applause for our Honorable Minister. I'd request everyone to please settle down and take their seats. Well, ladies and gentlemen, up next we have our second panel of the evening, which is titled Battery Breakthroughs, Shaping the Future of Energy Storage. Now, this panel will delve into advancements in battery technology and its critical role in energy storage and grid stability. And to moderate this session, I would like to invite Parikshit Luthra, Senior Editor and Delhi Bureau Chief, CNBC-TV18, on stage. A round of applause for him, please. And our esteemed panelists for this session are Sambitosh Mohapatra, Partner, ESG Leader, PwC India; Ashish Gaikwad, Vice President and General Manager, Industrial Automation, Honeywell India; Dipesh Nanda, MD and CEO, Tata Power Renewable Energy Limited, and Dr. Dhruva Purkayastad, Director, Growth and Institutional Advancement, CEEW. Over to you, Parikshit.
Thank you so much, everyone in the audience, and you've been sitting here patiently. You've been a great audience and a great support all evening. We really appreciate the fact that all of you made it here, and we're going to start an excellent conversation in a short while from now, and we'll make sure we'll make it worth your while. You've heard the minister. In fact, you've heard two ministers. You've heard key policymakers, industry leaders on what they feel about India's energy transition. And this is the big priority around the world, isn't it? And this is a big business opportunity as well. How do we win this? In fact, John Podesta, the US President's climate envoy, was in India recently, and the whole talk, in fact, the whole visit was about how India and the United States can have a resilient supply chain on clean energy components, have manufacturing in India, and rise up to China, because China dominates the global supply chain. So when it comes to clean energy, the conversation is going at the highest levels. Even when Prime Minister was in Singapore today, there was a lot of talk about collaboration in green ammonia, green hydrogen, and cross-border electricity trade as well. So it's going to get very, very interesting right now. Minister Prahlad Joshi spoke about the Surya Ghar Yojana. You've got electric vehicles that the government is promoting in a big way. I can go on, but I'm not the expert here. You've got four excellent panelists, and I'm going to begin with them. Let me begin with you, Sambitosh. If we were to ask you about the International Energy Agency's predictions, saying that we need to grow at least six-fold by 2030, our renewable energy storage capacities have to increase significantly if we want to meet our net zero targets by 2050 as a country. How do you think India is positioned right now? This conversation is going on in this ballroom right now in government corridors, but where do you think India is and how are we poised for the future?
So thanks for this opportunity, and I'll go back maybe 7 years back. There was this study which Delphi created in 2017, and they took about 100 Nobel laureates, the best of think tanks, and they did a survey that what is the one invention or innovation which will disrupt the way the society functions? Okay? And the answer was storage. And they said storage is the single most technological innovation which will disrupt the way human beings will interact with each other by 2040. Okay? And the second prediction was, we are slowly moving to an all-electric society. Okay? So thanks for this, and I have the utility operator, the technology provider, and a guy who manages finance here, right? So I have, and I was told that make it very simple, consultants make it jargonish. Okay? So let me start with the IEA prediction. And I'll keep the parameters, hopefully many engineers here, but I'll keep it at gigawatt hours, which is what is the capacity of the batteries, right? So last year, the whole battery energy storage systems, which we call as BESS, was about 200 gigawatt hour. Okay? 90 gigawatt hour was only last year, and 45 was previous. The prediction which IEA makes is that this 200 will go up to about 1,000 by 2030.
1,500.
And yeah, 1,500,000. And it can go up to about 3,000 to 5,000 by 2050. Okay? Two scenarios they have built out. One is business as usual, one is the net zero emissions reduction. Now the second point what you mentioned is the business opportunity. So if today it is about $15 billion, by 2030, this is a business opportunity of $200 to $700 billion across various reports. And by 2040, it is $1 to $3 trillion. Okay? That's very clear. Now, where is India positioned here? we are very clear, we are 100, 200 megawatt, right? And our ambition, we did a report for Niti Aayog for 2030. We said that it will be about 600 gigawatt hours, out of which 200 would be on the BESS, and the rest, 60% would be EV and the other applications. So it's about 600, let's say, for the Indian context. Now let's go to the most important thing. Where is the manufacturing capacity, okay, which is the most important thing? Global manufacturing capacity is about 2,600 gigawatt hour. India is about 10 to 20, when global is about 2,600 gigawatt hour. China had planned for 5,800 gigawatt hour by 2025. China was 0 in 2020. It is now about 500, okay, in 3 years. We are at 1020. Okay. Our ambition is we want to go up to 100 gigawatt hour by 2030, 50 supported by government schemes, but the rest. So what I'm saying is, look at the scale, look at where the global is, and my challenge and the thinking that I have is whether we'll miss the bus similar to what we missed in the renewable play, in the manufacturing side of it, or will we take advantage of it? So that's my vision.
Right. That indeed is an important point, because when it comes to battery energy storage manufacturing systems, almost 80 or 83% of the capacity is dominated by China right now. So there is an opportunity to grow, and countries would like to diversify their supply chain. Let me bring in Ashish at this point. Ashish, Honeywell needs no introduction. In fact, we'd like to tell our audience that just a couple of hours back, you announced a microgrid battery energy storage program in Lakshadweep. Now, you offer a range of battery energy storage solutions across the country. What is the one message that you're again and again driving home to policymakers, to audiences like these, to the general public in the country, to your client, in order to not just grow your business, but trying to make them understand the importance of scaling up and scaling up fast and having the right policies for it?
Well, let me peel the onion a little bit more, what Sam started, right? So everybody knows that India wants to be a 500 gigawatt renewable energy country by 2030, right? And if we need to do that, as we know, renewable energy by itself will not be something that will provide power around the clock. And so it needs to be supported by the storage systems, right? And there are two most popular storage systems which are coming up. One, which is the battery energy storage system, and the other one, which is trying to compete with it, it's the pumped hydro storage system, right? These are the two. There are others, but these two seem to be the top two that we need to consider. Now, if India achieves the 500 gigawatt aim for the renewable energy, what it means in terms of the support it needs in terms of storage is it will need, like Sam said, 210 gigawatt hours of battery energy storage system. Today, we have about 220 megawatts. So it's 1,000 times increase from what we are today. So that's the scale of the opportunity just for battery energy storage. And today, if we look at the pumped hydro storage systems in India, it's in the range of about 3.3 gigawatts. What we need, as he said, is about 50 gigawatts or so. So that's another 20x type of an opportunity that lies in front of us. So the sheer size of the opportunity that exists in the country in the next 6 years itself is mind-boggling. Yeah. Also, to answer the second part of your question, therefore, we need to make sure that we need to have a way in which we can scale these things up very, very fast. Because we don't have time. If we have to get to 500 gigawatts, all of this is absolutely necessary. And that's where I think companies like Honeywell can play a role from the technology perspective to reduce the time to implement such systems and then stabilize them and make them usable such that the rest of the goals can be achieved.
Right, very interesting points. Ashish telling us about the huge scale of the opportunity. So the opportunity is there for the next decade. It's for India to leverage and capitalize on. Dipesh, if I were to ask you, some very interesting programs by Tata Power over the last few weeks. One was, I heard a press statement where it was quite clear that Tata Power wants to integrate electric vehicle users of Tata Motors with the solar rooftop scheme of the government. Secondly, you've just commissioned a solar and battery energy storage project in Rajnandgaon, Chhattisgarh, perhaps the largest in the country. Give us a sense of how you see Tata Power's story with India's energy transition and in battery storage growing over the next 10 years.
Thanks a lot. I'd make it a little more broader than that. I think for India to achieve their targets, what was mentioned, 210 megawatts of capacity that we have on battery storage, 120 was built by Tata Power. But the here and now is to be felt every week in India currently, with the Indian government and the state governments coming up with tenders for battery storage. And there is a big story for you to, play. The price of battery storage in 2022 was at 20 lakhs per megawatt per month. That was the tariff. In 2023, that dropped to 7 lakhs 10,000 per megawatt per month. In 2024, in the month of June, that price dropped to 4 lakhs 28,000. In July, it dropped to 3 lakhs 78,000. There's a bid that will open on the 11th of September for 1,000 megawatts, which I think will settle at 3 lakhs 50,000. There is a 75% drop in pricing, and the capacities have gone up. There isn't a week that goes by where you don't have at least 1,000 megawatt hour of battery storage tenders coming out. And there is a beeline of bidders out there to book capacity. And it makes good sense because, as you mentioned in your opening comments, there is massive overcapacity in China. The Chinese government is trying to grapple with that to make sure that they don't end up with the same situation that they have with solar panels, for example. But the correction will take a long time. So we are in a long cycle of low-price lithium-ion battery, and the technology is improving in terms of number of cycles and so on. What this does is that it brings down cost and it helps us solve a very critical problem in India, which is that of connectivity. Now, for India to grow at the numbers that were mentioned, we need to add around 35 to 40 gigawatt of renewable capacity every year. But we don't have the grid connectivity for that. This year, for example, we only have 10 gigawatt of connectivity left on the grid. Next year, we have 18 gigawatt, and the year after, we have 42 gigawatt. So if your connectivity is running way behind your generation capacity, there is no way you can add this. So the question is, how do you solve it? And that's where the aspect of battery storage fits in. During the non-solar and non-wind hours, use battery storage to use the grid. So you will enhance the utility of the grid through battery storage. And that's why if you see the tender designs which are coming out are substation specific, that you take this substation, give us 1,000 hours of battery, you leave the usage of the battery to the DISCOM, and then you get a capacity charge. It's more like a transmission business where you get a fixed capacity charge. There is no utility charge in terms, as long as you meet the round trip efficiency and you meet the degradation numbers, you get your capacity charge. So again, massive revolution going on, great time for India to capitalize on. Super happy that the Indian government is doing all the right things. The states have got excited. There are these tenders coming out. And then it also does not have issues which the conventional solar and wind industry faces, which is of land, for example. The land required is much more compact as compared to what you would need for a solar and wind plant. Coming to Tata Power, our sister company TACO has 6,000 gigawatt hours of capacity in terms of integrating batteries. And you know that Tata Sons is also investing in cell technology. Lots happening in this space.
No, absolutely. Very interesting times. And we need to also look at the financing part of it. A lot of the investments can come domestically, but you need foreign investments as well. And that's where I'd like to get Dhruba's perspective. Dhruba, when it comes to the funding angle, how can we make sure that more FDI inflows come into India in the renewable space, in the battery energy storage space?
No, thanks for the question. And just coming in after everybody has spoken, before I get to finance, let me try and get that. Look, finance is not delinked from business models. And one of the fundamental things is that if the business model works, so will finance flow. Our challenge is very simply, and when we talk sustainability, we talk climate, we are somehow assuming that finance will flow for non-commercial reasons, which will not be the case. Let's accept that to start with. Now let me give you the perspective on the business models as I see it, and you'll automatically kind of get to the financing without me trying to give you the standard prescriptions that government and policy needs to do that and banks need to do this, without which. Just think of it and let me just give you a possible two pathways of business models. Think 2040. You know what? This is what the Honorable Minister was talking about, Surya Ghar Yojana, right? Now, we are used to thinking that electricity is about, like we said, this is large storage, large infrastructure, produce it, and yes, it is infirm, therefore I need to store and make it. Now let's shift the paradigm for you. Do you find it a problem in financing your mobile phones? Does anybody find it a problem? Right. Now, what's happened there? What is Surya Ghar Yojana? Just think carefully that this is renewable energy 300 units. Now, if I look at the prices at which electricity is going, the last storage bid came at 4.7 or something rupees. And you're getting standard 5 kilowatt hour, 50,000 rupees coming down to depending on what you're charging at C2, C3, C6, C, you're coming down depending on to 5 rupees per unit of electricity. Now that's for mobility application. Now let me kind of explain what I'm saying is we are not used to thinking that infrastructure and electricity is a retail business. What I'm saying here is, and it's a private sector industry audience, and it's important to kind of, well, I'm not crystal ball gazing, but still, if I were to say today that there will be an industry of retail energy storage, yes, Honeywell can lead that revolution for sure. What does it do? You have every kirana shop actually putting up 50,000 rupees and trading with the wires as the grid. What changes it? This is the business model for energy storage. Think retail. I'm not undermining the need for what you said as pumped hydro. Yes, some facilities is required. But let me draw your attention of those who started working in mid-90s. What happened to telecom? Think of the incumbent in telecom as to what it changed, what happened. Was it government policy that moved or markets and technology that moved? If your question is of financing, as the cost curves goes down, with what? With scale, with technology? Right now, not commenting, but you have clearly mentioned how the cost curve is going down with scale, and it last 10 years at what it's seen. And it's clearly kind of what is called the Moore's law in terms of reduction, which is exponentially gets reduced even as capacity gets increased. And if you apply that, you're coming to a position where you don't have to think of financing. It will become a retail electricity where you're basically saying, but the unfortunate part in this is discoms will become redundant. The question is that discoms will get reduced to a set of wires. Yes, that will be important. That's a natural monopoly. That's where the focus needs to be. Electricity, therefore, as you walk into a new home, like you buy an AC, like you buy a TV, for example, you will buy electricity which will become a consumer durable. That's your 2040 for you. Thank you.
Right. That's a great point, and I think both Ashish and Dipesh were listening very intently to that. Clearly, energy storage systems will bring with it their own retail avenues, as we see with electric vehicles.
Sorry,
as
just
well.
to add.
Yes.
And therefore the market in India is so huge that you don't have to think for FDI and how do I get more, because the capital has no choice but to come to India.
Okay, so markets will decide what will happen. So Ashish and then Dipesh, where do you think the retail models will come for? And taking a cue from Dhruva's point, what do you think will be the role of DISCOMs or the place where DISCOMs will be maybe 10 years from now as we push our renewable energy goals?
No, like Dhruva said, I also don't have a crystal ball. But I think I agree with him. He is trying to make a point where you democratize this whole notion of producing your own renewable power. You know, that's what he's going towards, and I totally agree with it. Of course, it's not going to happen overnight. Technology will play a big role in that. And also, even in the large storage systems that me and Sam talked about, there is a modular approach that can come in. Let me explain that to you a little bit. So today, when we design, and Dipesh and I, we both are in a similar type of a business, we have to design these large systems which are probably custom made, and there is a lot of engineering and there is a lot of technology that goes into it. Maybe the path is to quickly design something which is so modular and that you can just add like Lego blocks. So if you need a small power requirement for the retail, you can do that for a shop. You can keep on adding those blocks one after the other, and you can get it to a larger scale. So without getting into the technical nitty-gritties, I think there's a play to go into the retail part of it by using the technology, and the same technology can be scaled up, for the larger storage.
I'll just add my comments. On the retail side, we have a very thriving rooftop solar business, which you alluded to in the beginning. We are seeing a direct correlation between rooftop solar and, say, the purchase of ACs. And now we are trying to push that concept in terms of rooftop with EVs. The PM scheme that's launched, great tailwind, extremely conducive for consumers. In a few markets, we are seeing 10x growth in terms of rooftop. So that's one quick comment. The other one is that finance and the role that finance can play. I think the policy of the government in terms of capital subsidies to, make battery cells in India, that could be enhanced. You could come up with a scheme that, say, over the next 3 to 5 years, we start manufacturing our own battery cell. And then the difference between the earlier announcements and what they could, potentially do is that earmark some percentage of your revenue to R&D on battery storage, because you'll see a massive evolution in terms of R&D, especially when it comes to the cathode of the battery. Lastly, I would say DISCOMs are not going away anytime soon. In fact, battery storage will only help DISCOMs. Their revenues will increase, their losses will decrease, the curtailment will decrease, and so on. So BESS and DISCOMs, I think, will be an add-on, and I don't think DISCOMs will get obsolete anytime soon.
All right. Sam, if we were to ask you about maybe the policy gaps, we began by talking about how do we, over the last few days, I've been having so many conversations about being an alternative to China, to checking China, but frankly, how do we ensure our own growth in the world when it comes to renewable energy, battery storage, make sure we are self-reliant? How do we win this battle? What are the policy gaps that you see?
So at least I believe we are a decade behind in the debate that we had started. That was content and carriage segregation. If you remember 2014, 13-14, it was I think that's what Dhruva is mentioning, that India should seriously look at content and carriage segregation and allow the power sector to actually unleash both employment for our people and these new technologies to be embedded. Because I still believe government is going ahead on the energy trilemma. Around the first is energy security, which means that less and less dependence on oil and gas because we're importing. Second is on equity and affordability, excess. I think they're doing a good job around it. And the third is on the sustainability. So it's all working together, but I still believe this carriage content segregation is a decade delayed.
Great. Final comments?
Thank you. just want to compliment Sambithosh on the point on policy is it's at times important for policy to make technology choices. We are hearing this China +1 or this China capture, but as of now, if 83% of the market, you know what, where we get captured. Again, I'll draw you to telecom. I think some of you might remember that there was a technology called CDMA, which was not only more efficient, but what happened? We are still facing that call drops today because the cells which had to be constructed with us because your density is increasing and your call keeps dropping when you're on the road. CDMA won't, but that technology did not lead. Please understand it is important why that GSM came in, and please recognize that while we are in lithium ion today, it is important for policy to shift and intervene, because it's not the days of while saying, well, business is no business for the government, let the business do business, but there is a need to shift the playing field. There is a need for green industrial policy. There is a need to shift it often to picking winners, which is not prescribed often in many terms. And here I'm pointing the need to start thinking on sodium ion. I know it's 10 years away. And that reduces your dependency to that extent. And when you get captured by technology and do not have a technology capture policy, let the policy drive the technology choices.
I think that's a great point to end on. Clearly, we need a very agile policy setup. Be very aware of what's happening globally. And maybe, as there is a debate over China right now, whether we need to accept investments, whether we need to accept their imports, I think there is a view that take whatever you can from China in the form of components, which gives you that strategic advantage right now. You can put curbs later. So let's be open to that. Let's be open to technology and make sure we win the game. Thank you very much to all our panelists. This could have gone on for the next 1 hour, but we've run out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for that invigorating session. I request Mr. Gaikwar and Parikshit to please present our speakers with a small token of appreciation. Our next session this evening is a fireside chat on India's energy transition roadmap, wherein we will discuss India's strategic approach to energy transition, focusing on key challenges, opportunities, and the role of innovation in achieving our sustainability goals. We will also explore how Honeywell is contributing to this transformative journey and what lies ahead for India's energy landscape. So without further ado, to moderate this session, I would like to invite back on stage Shireen Bhan, Managing Editor, CNBC TV18, and Mr. Ashish Modi, President, Honeywell India, to take this conversation forward. A round of applause for both of them, please.
Thank you very much. The conversations have been riveting, and particularly the last one did throw up some very interesting challenges or dilemmas that policymakers are going to have to face, and of course industry will need to watch for. But let's take that conversation forward. Ashish, thanks very much for joining us here this evening. Let me start by where we have left the conversation and ask you about what Honeywell is trying to do as far as the India opportunity is concerned, and also cope with India's unique challenges. 2023-24 has been a milestone year for Honeywell in India in many ways, a record number in terms of what you've been able to deliver from India in terms of sales, the highest ever. First of all, explain to us, as you look at the India opportunity and this energy transition, what looks most exciting to you?
Yeah, I'll start with a little bit of background, apart from the energy transition. In terms of where Honeywell is focused and Honeywell India is focused, there are 3 mega trends that we have defined. The first one is energy transition sustainability, and this is a global trend, and I think very relevant in India, and we've been talking about this all evening. The second one is around automation. If you look at Honeywell, we are a 100-year-old automation controls company, and I think what's different is the whole digital and AI piece. So we are very bullish on that, and that's a mega trend that's driving our growth the way you described it. The third one is future of aviation. We are big into aviation, and there is element of energy transition there as well. That is a mega trend. The 2 more that I will add in the Indian context that we see is infrastructure growth and Make in India. And then if I look at the India landscape and what's driving our growth is these 5 macros. Coming back to energy transition, of course, Honeywell, and we've been talking about the 3 panels. Yeah. We have several technologies in that, but I'll break it down into 3 core segments, the way we think about energy transition. The first one is, of course, a lot of technologies in various sectors, whether it's green hydrogen, whether it's battery storage, whether it's carbon capture, whether it is flow batteries, all the technologies that come along with it. The second piece that we haven't really spoken about all evening is materials, sustainable materials. Yes. That's a big piece in our storyline, if you will. We have technologies that replace plastic, for example. There is a big mandate around single-use plastic ban, and we have a replacement for that, for example. We have technologies that can replace hydrofluorocarbons, which are refrigerants, which are extremely hard on the environment, for example. Yeah. And then we have technologies which can turn plastic into roads, for example. So we think about sustainable material as a big part of the equation. And the third one is around economic models. And I can talk about that more, but we think about it very holistically when we think about the green energy transition. Sorry, long answer. But I covered a lot of ground.
I like the fact that you've given me plenty of food for thought and plenty of issues to dive right into. So let's pick up on the automation lever that you spoke of, which is one of the mega trends and one of the pillars that you're focused on in the context of India and in the context of this move towards AI and now Gen AI. How are you marrying the two, and what looks exciting on that front as we move forward?
Yeah, I think that's a big lever, and everybody has been talking about it. I think, first of all, I would say that we've been using AI for many, many years. Yes. I think this became a buzzword now, but the reality is that as controls company, we've been using it in some form or fashion for many, many years. Because a lot of our solutions have to be...
But Gen AI specifically?
Well, those are words we can add in front of it, but we call it deterministic AI, which means that your AI should give you a definite answer that the plant can run at, the flight can use. You cannot be like, 80% accurate and that's good enough. So we think of this more in terms of deterministic AI. Now, what we are doing differently, Shireen, is that for us, what's different a little bit is AI has become a centerpiece of all our products, all our technology. I cannot think of any product or technology that we are developing today that does not have embedded AI. Almost 100%. And that's become a very, very centerpiece of our theme. The other piece I'll say is that a lot of our automation solution in the context of energy transition will help solve the demand side of the equation, which means that if you control better, if you automate your processes, you consume less energy. Right. You run more efficiently. And by virtue of that, you reduce your energy consumption. And that's a big part of the equation. If you look at the energy efficiency itself, that can solve a lot of problems. So you just don't produce carbon, and that will solve the problem. So that's the way we think of automation in the context of
Let me pick up on the other two aspects that you spoke of, infrastructure and Make in India. And the infrastructure story, especially in a post-COVID era in India, has been driven largely by the government. The expectation and the hope is now that we will start to see the private sector deliver on that as well. On the Make in India side as well, you know, we've been stuck at that manufacturing share to GDP of about 50-odd% for the last decade or so. And again, the expectation and the aspiration is to take it to 2020 plus. Now, how would you play both those? How do you see the opportunities opening up on both those fronts in India?
Yeah. Look, we have been in India for 100 years, we like to call it, and definitely for more than around 40 years. And so we are very entrenched in the way we operate in India. You know, Make in India is become important because of the government push today. We have a very methodical, we have 3 manufacturing plants, which we manufacture for India and we also export, and that's what we've been doing for ages. Now we are very focused in thinking through every product line that exists, that we sell in India, to be Make in India. And that's a function of the volumes that we can sell in India, and that determines the economics of whether or not we bring that product or that line into India. And we carefully go through that exercise every year for every product line to figure out whether or not we would make it in India. We recently announced a line for making airport guidance lighting system here, for example, just 6 months ago, which is huge for us. These are the blue and the green lights that you see on the runway when you land in. So we continue to bring in more and more products in India to be compliant to what the government bids are and the government requirements are, but to also justify our cost point as we operate in the India market. That's how we think about it.
You know, you were talking about airports and lighting systems that you're working on, and you also talked about aviation as being one of the big focus areas in the context of, you know, the sustainable fuel. How do you see the Indian aviation story? It is a fast-growing market, but it's also a duopoly at this point in time. The viability itself of many airlines is in question, and we've seen the Indian aviation market emerge as a cautionary tale of what often tends to happen. So given where things are today, how do you see the Indian aviation sector opening up, and what is the kind of potential and headroom for growth that you see on the fuel side as well, given that?
We are very bullish. I mean, if you think about, and I was talking to somebody this morning, giving them the statistic, and it doesn't dawn on you until you hear the statistic. The reality is, India became free in 1947, and we added 728 aircrafts in the time since independence. Yeah. India has 1,500 aircrafts on order as we speak. Yeah. In the next 3 years to 4 years, you will have 2,200 aircrafts, which means that we'll triple the current capacity. And we'll add 2x the capacity that we are. So, and that's all done deal. This is not theory. This is the Air India aircrafts and Indigo aircrafts on order that are starting to be delivered. And from our perspective, we supply equipment to these aircrafts. So therefore, obviously, we are very bullish on the segment itself. So there's absolutely no question that this segment and this sector will do very well because of the aircraft that are on order. And to complement and supplement that, if you look at the number of airports that the government has added in the last 10 years. Now we have 152 airports, I think, in the country, and there's aspiration to add another 100 or so. And therefore, the infrastructure that goes to support the aviation sector is coming in place. So there's absolutely no reason to believe that this will not take off.
No, it has taken off.
It has taken off, and I think that's already done deal. From the fuel side, and you mentioned SAF, I think that maybe I think the minister alluded to that a little bit. You know that there are CORSIA requirements for airlines to comply to starting 2027, which means that the airlines coming in, or the aircrafts coming into India will have to have, if they were to refuel in India, would have to have a certain blend of SAF. And to that extent, India is obliged or will be compelled to have SAF in the mix there. And we think that will take off 2027, 28. There is an intention by the government for a 1% and 2% blend in 2027 and 28. They've said that already. Yeah. And therefore, SAF becomes real at that point. We provide a lot of technology for SAF. You give us any feedstock and we will make SAF out of it. That's the way to think about it. You can take carbon dioxide, add hydrogen, make methanol, and then make SAF. You can take biomass and make SAF. I mean, we have like a lot of ways to make SAF. So we are very excited about the possibility that when SAF becomes real, we will have the technology to do it.
So SAF becoming a reality in 2027 and beyond. But let's talk about something that the government is very excited about. And we heard the minister, in fact, both ministers talk about it and highlight that as a priority for the government. And that is green hydrogen and the green hydrogen mission, which has been sort of put in place and the execution roadmap has been laid out as well. How do you read that story?
We just did a panel on this, and I was on the panel, so I think I've said already I've shared my thoughts. I think, first of all, we have to applaud the government on the initiative with the $2.8 billion of PLI schemes that they have announced on the electrolyzer side. And we see a lot of momentum, a lot of action, a lot of activity in the space of electrolyzer manufacturing itself. For the hydrogen, the green hydrogen space, I think, and we discussed this again in the panel, the question of cost is a very important one.
Yeah.
And unless you hit that cost point of whatever, $2 or $4, whatever you would call it, is a very, very important hurdle to cross. And I believe that once you cross that hurdle, I think you can really build a hydrogen economy. For India, it's a great strategy because the biggest cost in hydrogen is actually electricity or energy. And India has abundant solar. And because you have abundant solar, you can afford to make green hydrogen and not have to go through this curve of let's do blue and then let's go green. And therefore, it's a great strategy. But it's a hard strategy to execute. Because not only do you have to get the cost curve down, you also have to have the infrastructure around it. Hydrogen is a very difficult gas to handle. It's not safe. It can escape very easily. A lot of the infrastructure is not fungible with hydrogen, and therefore a lot of the infrastructure downstream would have to be built to really make hydrogen work. But if it works, it solves, and the minister spoke emphatically about 88% import. I absolutely hates it, and so do we and the country, because it's a huge burden on the exchequer. And therefore, if hydrogen really comes through, it's great for the country.
Well, speaking of what is great for the country is not just make in India, but it's also develop an IP in India. And in the context of Honeywell and future innovations, and I heard Gavin talk a little bit about that and the kind of work that's happening here in India. Take us through the plans on that front as well. And, the exciting breakthroughs that are being driven out of India globally for Honeywell.
Yeah, sure. We have about 13,000 employees in the country. Half of them are R&D engineers that are developing products and technologies not only for the globe, but for India, of course. And India is the second largest R&D center outside of US for Honeywell. So obviously India, and we made this investment 30 years ago. This is our 30th year of making that investment in R&D. So we have a lot of capability, and we're not just a back office doing what US told us to do, to be honest. We do a lot of original research out of India for the globe and for India. The other fact that I would like to share with you is that 60% of Honeywell's R&D is spent on technologies that will drive an ESG outcome. 60% of our R&D. And that's also true for what we spend in India. And therefore, a lot of our technologies, I spoke about green hydrogen, I spoke about SAF, I spoke about the battery energy storage, and so on and so forth, carbon capture. A lot of these technologies were developed out of our R&D center in Gurgaon. And that's just, when we share this fact with a lot of people, they scratch their head, but that's the reality. Now, a lot of these technologies are now being implemented around the globe, and we hope that they will soon be deployed here in India in our backyards, and that's our hope. So we have a great capability here that we're using to develop technologies for the globe and for India.
And we hope and look forward to hearing much more from you on that front. I think that does deserve a big round of applause for the fact that there's a lot that's actually going on that's happening out of Gurgaon for Honeywell globally as well. But let me end then by asking you, Ashish, we talked about the opportunities, but let's also leave the participants in the room here with what you believe will be some of the key challenges that we need to grapple with, both at a policy front as well as from a private sector point of view. And of course, you know, getting the right economic model in place across different sectors will be one of the key aspects. What are some of the other challenges you believe we need to grapple with?
Look, the one we haven't talked about is capability. A lot of the skills that are needed to develop these technologies don't exist. I mean, take semiconductor, for example. That's not an energy transition subject, but it's a massive focus by the government. And what we are finding increasingly is that we just don't have that capability. And the challenge will not be whether or not we can make the technology, but the question is, will we have the skill and the capability and the workforce to really develop that technology and also deploy the technology? So I think, to me, if one thing that will fail us is not being able to develop the capability within our organizations into the broader ecosystem to be able to build these technologies and deploy these technologies. So I'll leave it there. The challenges are many. I can go on and on for another 30 minutes on the challenges, but I think this is one that I would point out for the audience.
We'll have you back to spend another 30 minutes on the challenges, but that's an important one, and I think that there is also an acknowledgement and a recognition on the part of policymakers that that is going to be one of the crucial aspects. In fact, the budget focused on developing some of these capabilities that you speak of, but thank you very much for giving us a glimpse, a sneak peek into what's going on at Honeywell, and more importantly, how India is shaping up as far as Honeywell is concerned. We look forward to hearing a lot more from you. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause. Thank you very much, Ashish, for joining us here this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Modi and Shireen, for that insightful chat on India's energy transition. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to dive into a final discussion of the day titled From Waste to Watts: The Role of Biomass in Green Energy Transition. Now, this session will explore the potential of biomass in green energy and its role in the energy sector. And to moderate this session, I would like to invite on stage Mridu Bhandari, Consulting Editor, Network 18, and joining her on stage are our esteemed set of panelists, Dharmesh Mahajan, Chief Technology Officer, SR, Ranjit Kulkarni, Vice President and General Manager, Energy and Sustainability Solutions, Honeywell India, Rajnath Ram, Program Director, Power and Energy, Niti Aayog, and Sameer Sinha, Chief Executive Officer, Sugar Business, Triveni Engineering and Industries Limited. A round of applause for all of them, please. Over to you, Mridu.
Thank you very much, Swati. Well, ladies and gentlemen, always tough to be the last session on a very, very interesting event, because I know you're all hungry and looking forward to dinner, but I promise this session is going to be worth your time and worth your while here. Now, I want you to imagine a future where waste from our fields, our forests, our cities is basically fueling our homes, powering our industries, and propelling our planes. And all the while that this is happening, it is actually cutting down greenhouse gas emissions, enhancing energy security, and driving economic growth for the country. This is not a distant dream. This is actually well within our reach. Biomass, often referred to as the unsung hero of renewables, could well be the cornerstone that India's green energy transition needs. In fact, India produces about 500 million tons of biomass annually, and unfortunately, as of now, only a fraction of it is actually harnessed for energy production, with much of it going to waste or being burnt. Now, to meet global net zero targets by 2050, the International Energy Agency suggests that sustainable biofuel production must triple by 2030. But how do we really overcome the logistical challenges of collecting biomass, the production feasibility, economic viability, and the need for advanced technology and policy support? So, what role will then government incentives, private investments, and international collaborations play? Those are some of the big questions we are posing here to our final panel of experts tonight. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us here. And perhaps if I can begin with a Niti Aayog perspective, because, you know, there's one policy perspective on the panel, so I'd like to open the floor with that. You know, with the ongoing climate challenges, we've seen a little bit of reduction in yield last year, particularly in maize, in rice. So give us a sense then how the government should balance food security in a country that's as populous as India with, of course, the goal of energy security, especially when we're looking at first-generation ethanol to be particular.
Thanks for the question. Let me provide some brief perspective about the energy transition. Niti Aayog has set up several task force, the working group. They are working on developing the strategy for the net zero roadmap for 2070, and there are various working groups working on that. One of the aspects that you have highlighted is how the biomass, or particularly in the renewable sector, can play a major role in the decarbonizing the sector. One aspect definitely is how to maintain the energy security without compromising the food security aspect. Some of the aspects like the second generation biofuels that we are aiming at, and then the advanced biofuels. Recently the PM-Jeevan has been also amended to incorporate the various other aspects as well. Whether 2G particularly have been given due focus, and the scheme has been extended for another 5 years to provide some financial support to make the project viable on this ground. The other aspect has been also included here is the bolt-on and the brownfield aspect, where you can utilize the existing infrastructure to economize your place. The aspect like the food security, and recently we have seen that some of the rice has been diverted for the bioethanol production. So those would be, I think, discouraged from the government side. Even the FCI has not allowed to go further ahead on that, because we don't want to compromise the food security aspect there. And also, in terms of life cycle emission, this is one of the largest contributor to the overall CO2 emissions. So that is another angle we are giving to it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Good to know that. And Sameer, if I can come to you next. The sugar industry has aggregated availability of feedstock when it comes to compressed biogas production. So give us a sense then, what are the big challenges in mainstreaming CBG? What are the logistical challenges that you face as a sector at large? And how can policy or other interventions really help mainstream this?
Thank you for that question. And let me answer that. CBG is a priority for the government, and it can set up huge number of decentralized plants. The government had that plan of 750 plants coming up. Now, the sugar industry per se is in a situation wherein quick wins can be achieved. The industry per se can put up 250 plants, and that's the quantum of feedstock available with them to put it up and execute it within, let's say, a time frame of at most 3 to 4 years. Now, what is preventing this from happening? That's the question we need to address. And there is one major challenge that comes in, because this is an aggregated feedstock at the sugar unit, so you don't have to go out and aggregate it yourself. Now, what is the challenge? The challenge is in the liquid digestate which gets produced over here. If I put up a, let's say, a 9 to 10 ton CBG plant, of, let's say, 200 tons per day of press mud, it will produce about 100 kiloliters per day of the liquid digestate, which is a fermented liquid organic manure. Now, I don't have the capability of going out and sell. I'm not in that business. Maybe I can distribute it to the farmers in my command area, but for how long can I do it? Therefore, we have been pressing the government if they can have a mandate to the fertilizer company for a compulsory offtake of the fermented liquid organic manure. That will solve the problem virtually always. And that's point number one. And the second is, as a combo, they can also pick up the solid manure. The solid manure is very popular with the farmers. The farmers are making a beeline for it. So that's one portion of it. The second portion is on the product side, wherein two things are happening. We need a pipeline injection of CBG to happen. What that means is a denser network of pipelines to happen. And that's a very important aspect over here. And of course, I'm not talking about the aggregation of the biomass for the other industries. Maybe they can mix it up with press mud a little bit. But that has its own sets of challenges, which we can discuss in a separate question, because it involves a long time, and I can give you the model of a solution around which you can play around with.
Right. Okay, so thank you for laying out those challenges from a sugar sector perspective for us. Dharmesh, coming to you, you've of course been on the policy side, on the buy side, on the sell side. You've seen challenges from all angles. Give us a sense then of what are the biggest challenges, according to you, that are uniquely Indian in mainstreaming biofuels and clean energy in India, and what needs to be done to move the needle and move it fast?
Thank you, Ridu. You gave a very wide canvas, but I think today's hot topic, or the darling of the day, is SAF. So I'll focus on SAF and the unique challenges associated with India per se, as well as the global dynamics that are there. So SAF is a very unique molecule because it goes into the planes. You have cars or trucks which you can run with the batteries, you can run with the ethanol, biodiesel, gas, whatever, multiple options, or hydrogen, for example. But in case of aviation industry, they are struck that they cannot use battery so easily, they cannot use hydrogen. They need liquid fuel. They are evaluating multiple options, but the challenges are very significant. So liquid fuel remains the option for them. And when we talk about liquid fuel, alternative liquid fuel or advanced fuel, we have multiple options, as previous speakers talked about earlier in the day. One of them is alcohol to jet, which is very much of interest for India because India is the biggest producer of sugar, or generally they compete with Brazil for being 1 or 2 in terms of sugar production. Another pathway is you use vegetable oil and fats and convert them in SAF. That technology is there with UOP. Coincidentally, I was selling that technology for 10 plus years. And there are other pathways, PTL, power to liquid, and other pathways. Now, one unique aspect about the aviation emission is that all the aviation that or the emissions we are watching right now on the planet, on the ground, are man-made, but they are, if you go to 10,000 feet level or 35,000 feet level where the plane fly, there is no other there is no industry, there is no power plant, there is no steel plant. It is only the planes or the missiles or the rockets, right? So the dynamics of that emission is very different. And how it is impacting planet when the stratosphere level emissions are taking place, it's a very different subject. And that's a dedicated subject. I don't want to get into that right now. So SAF remains the low-hanging fruit. But now when we talk about ethanol, and the talk happened about the hydrogen and the renewable energy being cheaper in India, when we look at the ethanol, it is C2H5OH, which is 46 molecular weight. And if we look at the oxygen content in that, it is around 16 molecular weight. So eventually we need to replace around 34.8 or roughly 35 weight% of that ethanol molecule with the hydrogen. Now that is where India can play a significant role because we have a lot of sun energy, solar energy with us. We have dropping RE prices with us, and we have sugar, a lot of sugar available with us, surplus sugar available with us. So I think that is one area where we can definitely see a disruption.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to come back to SAF in just a moment, but just to bring Ranjit into the conversation as well. Now, of course, technology is critical to bringing down costs and making biofuels and biomass really economically viable for the country. Give us a sense then of what are some of the most innovative breakthroughs that India can expect, particularly from Honeywell, and the broader market at large can expect, to mainstream this whole game for us.
Thank you, brother, for the question. I think technology plays a very, very key role. Okay, we look at 4 fundamentals when we develop a technology or how it evolves. So the first fundamental is the policy, which sets or creates what kind of feedstock are available. Then we look at mandates that typically governs how quickly or what volumes we need to get around there. Third, we look at infrastructure, whether it is existing or new. Because whatever technology we invent, it has to be palatable. So that's why most of our solutions we are coming today are drop-in solutions, because we know infrastructure burden is a huge. and it can be deterrent. And final piece is the finance, because when people lend to these projects, they look into what is the risk in lending, what are rate of returns, who are going to be the buyers. So we have to, when we discover or when we invent or we improve our technology, we have to consider all these 4 factors. Only then we know that the technology will be accepted and be affordable. So that's the first thing. When we look and take these 4 or 5 principles and we start a technology evolution, the first feed which we took actually was how can we leverage existing infrastructure. So the first technology that came in terms of biofuels were you didn't use cooking oils. Because used cooking oils, you can readily take it and you can use your existing infrastructure in refineries and quickly start co-processing. And that's how this technology or this sector evolved. Then once we started, industry had a confidence that this technology works, we can make SAF, it is certified, it works very well. Then they started building a dedicated plant. Because now the confidence in this technology was there. We launched this technology in 2013. As of today, 54 plants have already been licensed globally, which means the acceptance is very quick. But it's also a feedstock limited technology, because now you're only going after some used cooking oil, used fats, waste oil. It's a resource or it's available in limited quantities. What's next available for India? An agricultural country. Biofeedstock, correct? It comes in different shapes and form. It can be a garden waste, it can be an agriculture waste, it can be a forest waste. So there are different stocks, and there is a difference in how these stocks are being used and localized, okay? We will not have a magnitude of scale like a typical refinery here. So all these solutions will tend to be local. We are looking at hub and spoke model where people will try to use those feedstock available in the region. So the solutions have to come for it, whether it is used cooking oil, whether it is a bio-based feedstock, whether it is ethanol, and places where we are capturing cheaper hydrogen or we are generating cheaper hydrogen, capturing CO2 at reasonable cost. Those will get into power to liquid form. Those will go into e-methanol, e-fuels format. So we think that India will need using all of it. Our biofuels will compose of all of it, including CBG, that will also come. So we feel all of it, and this is where our biggest breakthrough have been in terms of biofuel space.
Right. So you're saying that solutions will have to be hyper-localized in different parts of India, considering we are vast and the geographical challenges.
Every molecule we find has to be utilized. It cannot go waste because we don't have technology. Technology will come and make sure that molecule is utilized carefully and to its highest value.
Right, right. And if I can come to you, Mr. Ram, you know, what are the government incentives that we can expect to see both on the cost and the price side, because we really need to improve economic feasibility for producers? And what are Niti Aayog's recommendations to the government on this front?
I think in the PM Jeevan Yojana, the scheme, we are providing the viability gap funding already, and something like 1,900 crore have been provided as of now. And this scheme has been further extended for another 5 years. So one is of course, providing the viability gap funding because the advanced biofuels need some kind of support because the technology is still too mature. Unlike the technology of 1G, which is already mature. The another aspect would be the pricing aspect. Unless we have the assured pricing for the product, the offtake would be a problem. So that's another aspect nature. And the third would be the tax, maybe the GST part, where I think we need to have a one kind of GST regime, where I think in the entire value chain we are still facing some problem on some component, and some component at higher GST rate and some component at the lower GST rate. So the uniform taxation regime will play another big role for making these sectors to happen and grow.
Okay. Well, I also want to spend a quick few minutes on the blending targets, and we've been talking about those. The government has set a target of 20% blending of petrol with ethanol by 2025-26. We're already at 15.9%. That looks optimistic. We've also achieved, we are looking at a 5% blend target for biodiesel by 2030. Samir, if I can come back to you, do we see the supply side building up to cater to some of these targets? And what lies beyond E20 for ethanol and its immense potential for India?
So, Mridu, that's a wonderful question. But before I come to that, let me stress one point, is that sugar industry is best placed for all the feedstocks. We talked about alcohol to jet. Where is 1G coming from? Sugar industry. The 2G potential for, again, is available at the sugar industry. Aggregated biomass is available over there. There are certain things like Mr. Ram did mention about the pricing and the enforceability of offtakes. That's doing it. For CBG, again, the aggregated feedstock is available. So let me now come back to the very interesting question that you raised. If you look at all the biofuels, the real success story, as I call it, has been the 1G ethanol, which I say biofueling the future. So that's the point. We are already, in the last 3-4 months, we have done 15.9, but we'll close the year at just under 14% blending. And this is because of a judgment call of stopping the sugar getting diverted. We restricted its diversion. Otherwise, we should have been sitting here at about 16%. Next year, we are looking at about 17% plus at about 800 to 850 crore liters, and then going 25, 26 at 1,000 crore liters. So first of all, I'll talk about the certainty of E20. From a capacity side, if you look at it, 1,050 crores is what's required for ethanol. For E20, you add another 350 crore liters or 300 crore liters for the other uses, which are chemical and potable going forward. And in terms of capacities, if you look at, even at an 80% capacity utilization, this translates into about 1,700 crore liters. And we already have on stream 1,569 crore liters, so only 100 crore liters, which is in various stages of construction. So from a capacity side, it's validated. From a feedstock side, it's absolutely validated. There's plenty of sugarcane. We are structurally a sugar surplus country, and therefore 45 lakh tons would need to get diverted into ethanol, apart from any evacuation for exports. Maize is coming up. You talked about the food security issue. Please note that in maize, very little is for human consumption. 6-7% only goes over there, you know. So it's not a food versus fuel debate. And I'm not even saying you increase the area. I'm saying the increase will come from the productivity. Now, this is the situation till 2025, not what happens beyond that. Now, beyond that, I'm only looking at two things. What are the productivity increases and why I'm so bullish about it? I'm bullish about the government focus in agriculture, and therefore for research institutions to come up with hybrid seeds and high-yielding seeds over there. The usage of technology, which would be satellite imagery plus AI plus ML happening over there. The third thing will be precision agriculture, precision inputs application, leading to targeted interventions. All this would lead to productivity increase. So today, if in the next 5 years, if I look at about from 80 tons per hectare of sugarcane productivity increase to 90 tons per hectare, it will give me about 350 crore liters of additional ethanol, which is virtually about 6% blending or 7% blending. Talk about an area increase. If you look at the long period average of the sugarcane area increase, about 1.5% per annum, that leads to about 275 crore liters. Now, the most important and the low-hanging fruit is the maize. The maize productivity is abysmally low. It's only now that the government has concentrated on it. The Indian productivity is about 3.16 tons per hectare, versus a global average of about 6 to 7 hectares. US is about 12. They use GM corn. I'm not advocating that, but I'm saying you can very easily come to 5 metric ton per hectare, very easily. That adds at 550 crore liters. And if there is an area increase of 10%, which is being advocated with the government focusing on maize cultivation, UP doubling the area under this, it adds up to another, let's say, 200 crore liters. All this adds up to about 1,350 crore liters, which is well enough for another E20, E22. And mind you, just 1 second, please. Yeah, the other thing is in terms of the 2G feedstock, which is available. Now, the 2G, we talked about the bagasse being available with the sugar factories for 2G. it will add up another 300 crore liters. It's all aggregated at one place. And the second thing is, if half, or let's say about 92 million tons of biomass is being burned, as we read in a report recently, if only half of it is converted into 2G, that adds up another 500 crores. So we are talking of way beyond 50%, and it's for the government to find the route to utilize it. And so this was from the supply side. Now we have talked on the offtake side. What do we need to do? Just three very simple things. Popularize FFVs, FFV/hybrids. That's the key.
Right.
And how do you popularize it? GST, road tax, registration. Bring it on par with EVs. Look at the Brazilian model, have an E20 dispensing, E100 dispensing, the customer chooses his own blends. So therefore, that consumption goes up
provided
over there.
the transport industry also.
Absolutely. So
plays
the offtake is there. And of course, smaller teething issues of decantation, and people will need to build storages at OMCs and the private sector. So this, I think, it's a very, very bullish story. And I think there's a huge potential if targeted properly. And we need to vision and plan for it right now. I understand NITI is in the process of making a roadmap from 2025 to 2030 for further.
So you laid that out very nicely for us. And a lot of what you spoke about, Ranjit, goes back to technology and really harnessing emerging technologies. What is the role that artificial intelligence, machine learning, and other emerging technologies are going to play as far as streamlining the biofuel supply chain is concerned, particularly when we are looking at ethanol, we are looking at SAF, and is AI going to then be the game changer here?
Absolutely. Every time we have a technological leap happening, it gives a lot more insights. Okay. What does AI do? What does data mining do? It tells us that it looks at thousands and thousands of, or millions and millions of data points, and tells us very quickly what a human eye could have taken hours and days and weeks and months. What does that help us? It helps us improve the efficiency of everything we do. It tells us where are the inefficiencies in the system and how quickly those can be addressed. That's the power of AI. Do we need it? Absolutely, because if we had to innovate fast, we had to think fast. We have to look at the data, we have to go for every possible and potential option, and that's what AI enables us. Today, we use that when I started my research career, we were just thinking about carrying out 10 reactions at a time. Very soon, we could do 1,000 reactions at a time in microreactors. Today, we have gone to nanoreactors. We can do 10,000 reactions at one time. Analyzing 10,000 experiments could take me years. Today, AI does it in a month. But this is just the experimental part. This is just finding out what's the right catalyst, what's the right recipe, what's the right technological solutions. AI is also used in all the monitoring of everything. That's my colleague was speaking about. It's not just making the technology, but it's all the components that come into the picture. The solution is green when everything in that value chain is green. Where you make it, how you collect it, how you convert it, and how you use it. Everywhere AI helps us to track complete ecosystem, and we do feel that AI will play a big role. We have started adopting it. As Ashish said, we have been using it for long ago. It's just that it changes word as per the new, every 5 years or every 2 years it comes up with a new acronym, but we have been using it all the way along.
All right. Well, we are completely timed out, but I'm going to give 30 seconds to each one of you to sort of imagine the future. Maybe 8 years from now, we are sitting and having this conversation again. What's going to be different? And what are you, as a key stakeholder of India's energy transition, pledging to here this evening? Dharmesh, if we can start with you.
So we heard you, Mridu, when you said that we have 500 million ton or whatever number you gave for the biomass available in the country. We heard Minister Puri talking about 88% of the import dependent upon the crude. So we have carbon, but we are importing the carbon. I think in next few years, I definitely see companies like Honeywell solving the puzzle and giving us we are running the refinery, second biggest refinery in UK. We want commercially attractive solution, and we are here to solve those challenges with the help of the companies, technology companies like Honeywell. And Honeywell bring very interesting aspect on the table. Honeywell not only is selling the technology for producing the fuel, they also have a very big business of the aerospace. So they understand the plane, they understand the fuel. So I think we are definitely looking forward to getting the solutions which can make it happen fast.
Fantastic. From Niti Aayog, what's the pledge we can expect?
Yeah, as of now, around 11% of the biomass is being utilized as a traditional fuel in the overall primary energy mix. So we see the reduction of the, biomass in terms of the cooking aspect, but the same biomass can be utilized by the biofuel industries, like CBG, and the bioethanol, biomethanol, biochar, and so many other aspects, and SAF. So all these aspects and the traditional biomass use would be reduced, but the largest, so we don't see any reduction in the biomass use in the overall primary energy mix. But the cleaner fuel will take the shape of that.
All right. Ranjit?
We love problems because that's how we work, correct? We love challenges. What I would like to see from ATS is not the same challenges, but a bigger challenges. Is once we achieve 20% bioethanol, once we achieve 5% SAF, what next frontier? How can we get from 5 to 50%? Because that's our long-term goal for 2050. That's what I would like to be talking about ATS from now.
All right. Samir, final word.
Yeah, 3 or 4 pillars of what I'm going to say. The first one is that, just as it was mentioned, could we look at 100% import substitution with 50-60% coming in from the biomass portion itself and the rest from the power savings, etc., which would come in. All these technologies absolutely commercialized. Whatever targets government has put in, they would be met. Whether it is SAF, whether it is CPG, and what have you, and 2Gs and 1Gs, and a far number of players into this business with virtually very little technical or business risks. The third point is an important point, wherein we would see that all the elements which the Honorable Prime Minister mentioned in this Pancha Amrit, which he did at the Glasgow 21 COP, they are all met. The 2030 pledges which he talked of, they are all absolutely met to the dot and even exceeded. That's number 3. And fourth, which we have forgotten, is a very vibrant carbon marketplace happening in India, because without which this is not going to happen. And all this biomass leading to a significant increase in the incomes of the farmers and a very vibrant rural economy at the end of the day.
That would be the most ideal situation for sure. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for those very incredible insights here tonight. Clearly a lot of untapped potential out there when it comes to biomass and biofuels in India. The journey from waste to watts has just perhaps begun for India. Not an easy one. A lot of economic and policy challenges out there. But thank you, gentlemen, for sharing solutions, sharing ideas here tonight. And we hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mridu. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mridu, and thank you to all our panelists for that insightful session. I would request you all to please stay back, and I'd request Mr. Kulkarni and Mridu to please present a small token of appreciation to our speakers. Of power-packed sessions with some very insightful conversations around India's transition towards a sustainable and energy-efficient future. And now, before we wrap this edition of the India Energy Transition Summit, I would like to invite back on stage Mr. Ranjit Kulkarni, Vice President and General Manager, Energy and Sustainability Solutions, Honeywell India, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Wow. I think it was a good success because I learned a lot today, okay? And it's through discussions, understanding challenges, bringing everybody in the room. I think it was very, very insightful. One of the best quote I thought was from Mr. Prahlad Joshi, our minister. What he said is, living with harmony, living in harmony with nature is sustainability. Very well said. I think we had some good insights today from Honorable Minister Hardeep Singh Puri. We had good insights from Prahlad Joshi, our minister, and as well as all the panel discussions, whether it is green hydrogen, batteries, as well as biofuels, and then the fireside chat with Ashish. Quite insightful discussion, and I think I have taken a few points back home to think about how things will change. And the last question I'll remember is, what should we be doing different 8 years from now? I think we should be talking on how we have achieved and what's the next challenge. With that, I would like to say thank you to CNBC team for helping us organize all of this. I would like to thank all the panelists, all the distinguished guests for coming here. I would like to thank you for all the audience for being so wonderful and enjoying all the conversation. I hope you all had a good time. Thank you very much. Thank you all my team for helping this to make this event happen. I know it has took a lot of effort, a lot of follow-up from all the team at CNBC and Honeywell to make this happen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Let's have a round of applause for the whole team. And now let's have some dinner. Okay, I think dinner is just served outside. Let's have some dinner. And we welcome you all to join with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kulkarni. With that, it's a wrap on our summit tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. And thank you to all our esteemed speakers, panelists, and guests for making this day so insightful. We hope you enjoyed all the sessions. Thank you so much once again for joining us. Please enjoy the rest of the evening.